101.5.
Good morning. We thank the Almighty God for giving us another very blessed day. And I welcome you to the show Alhaji And Alhaji for today, the mother of all talk shows on this platform. We say it as it is. We are honest, truthful, and straight to the point. And today, we actually have a 5-member panel that will be doing the discussion of the major issues that have been making the news over the past 5 or to 6 days. And one of the issues that we'll be talking about, the biggest issue, of course, is the matter of the cedi, because for the first time, the finance minister has spoken confidently about the fact that we may be seeing the cedi making some gains against its major trading currencies, because the cedi hasn't been looking particularly good in the eyes of Ghanaians and also the international media. There's a lot of coverage on the performance of the cedi out there, and then we'll put that together with the issues in the financial sector, especially having to do with the Ghana Amalgamated Trust. Now, Parliament has approved that with a sovereign guarantee for the Ghana Amalgamated Trust. When I say Parliament, I mean the majority, because the minority abstained from voting on the matter. They held the opinion that that particular agreement should not be before Parliament in the first place, because the Ghana Amalgamated Trust was not created by an act of Parliament, and the minority disagrees with even the vehicle, the Ghana Amalgamated Trust, being used to support banks which were struggling, those which could not meet the minimum capital requirements. And don't forget that the National Investment Bank, the board chairman of the National Investment Bank, has already resigned because of issues having to do with the Ghana Amalgamated Trust. He feels that they do not need the money that was going to be offered by the Ghana Amalgamated Trust, and that NIB can stay afloat and have a clean balance sheet by itself. They do not need the help that government was offering, but government is insisting on offering that help to them whether they want it or not. So that is one of the issues we'll be discussing. The Ghana Amalgamated Trust the idea is simple. Government is raising 2 billion cedis, handing it to private Ghanaians, and those private Ghanaians will use that money to invest into banks and acquire shares in return in those banks. And 2 state banks are part of the banks that the Ghana Amalgamated Trust will be used to invest into. That's the Agriculture Development Bank and the National Investment Bank. And so the cedi and the GAT will be our very first topic, and then we'll be talking about power crisis or not, because the minority is insisting that we are seeing the return of doom. So government says what we have seen, at least what some of us experience for 2 days, power outages, and a lot more people are still experiencing, is temporal. In fact, a request that has been made by GridCo for a load shedding timetable until March 19. They are saying it's a temporary arrangement, it's a temporal problem that's being caused by attempts to divert some power for use for the Pokwasi Interchange project. But the minority says that is inaccurate. So we'll be talking about whether the arguments being made by both sides are anything to go by. So we're talking about the power crisis, and then we'll be talking about the Milshort Commission. They have submitted their report to the president, and the president has also been responding for the second time to a letter from the national chairman of the National Democratic Congress, and he's directed the Attorney General to enact a law that deals with the phenomenon of political vigilantism. Don't forget that he indicated in the State of the Nation's address that he's giving the NDC and the MPP time to meet over the issue and find a solution. If they are unable to do so, he will then enact a law, order the enactment of a law to deal with the vigilante challenge. He has gone ahead and done that. Well, so we'll be asking whether that actually means that he's lost faith in the dialogue process. Well, he says that should not affect the dialogue process, but we are unclear as to whether he has now accepted the proposal from the National Democratic Congress for a broad stakeholder forum that is not limited to only the MPP and the NDC, but includes other stakeholder groups that are interested in the process. So That will be our third topic, and we are hoping to do this with a 5-member panel before 12 o'clock. Mr. Kwesi Prajinia is joining us today. He is the managing editor of Inside newspaper. Dr. David Percy is a student of history and politics. Richard Niyama is executive director for the Progressive People's Party. Emmanuel Wilson, director of communications for the People's National Convention. Comrade Ibrahim Murtala Mohammed is a former deputy minister of trade and industry and former member of parliament for Nanton constituency. They'll be doing justice to the topics we will be putting forward today. Let's go through the stories that are on the front pages of the major newspapers this morning. And I start with the Mirror. And the Mirror has hard work, honesty, pay. That's Maswo Kwame Lukuto. I didn't know he was on the front page of the Mirror newspaper. He's somebody I know very well from my town, actually, Sugakope. Black magic for sale on social media. Also, color combo. So those are the stories on the front pages of the Mirror. The Ghanaian Times has public outrage over assault of 3 journalists as NMC GJ Media Foundation for West Africa call for swift action against policemen. It comes with a picture of my very good friend Malik Suleiman, who was one of the victims of that attack, and Raisa Sambo, who was also a victim. Actually, we understand she had just delivered, and the attack had caused some serious problems to her, so she had to be rushed to the hospital. And it comes with the picture of the police officer accused of being the one behind the attack, Sergeant Ebenezer Akrofi, who is a member of the SWAT unit. And also we have a court received psychiatric report on pastor killer, UEW, disturbances, 2 students granted bail, and Algerian protests biggest in memory. And so that's also on those are on the front pages of the Ghanaian Times newspaper. The Daily Guide has no doomso, minister assures. Winneba Varsity students threaten more protest. Omaihini beaten in public. Mahama attacks Reverend Owusu Bempa. And judge warns journalists over reportage. And finally, the Daily Graphic has government bills STEM centers in pre-tertiary schools. Over independence on imports must stop. Finance Minister, 13-year-old apprentice mechanic burnt to death at Asafo. And also Bempa storms Radio XYZ, threatens to deal with Mugabe. So those are the stories on the front pages of the dailies we have today. So you can get one of those dailies and read out the stories for yourself. If you just join us here on the mother of all talk shows, Alhaji And Alhaji. A big thank you to the several radio stations across the country who are currently streaming us live, ensuring that their listeners also have the opportunity of listening to the discussion that will happen on the show this morning. A couple of them: Diamond FM 93.7 in Tamale, Sekpele 104.3 in Likpe, Radio Kwando 102.5 in Kwando, Lokusi Radio 96.1 in Virgo, Lukwati, Shine FM 96.9 is in Akachi, GFM Radio is in London, Radio Kita 95.7 is in Sabo. But those are just a few of the stations that are currently tuned in to your power station, Radio Gold 90.5. And if you use a multi-TV decoder, multi-TV channel 13, we are on multi-TV channel 13, tune in and listen to us. If you want to listen to us via the internet, it's tunein.com. But if you can also listen to, watch us through Facebook, PAP MCGH. Well, let's start today's discussion with an interview with Mr. Richard And Alhaji. Mr. Richard And Alhaji is actually a banking risk expert based in the US. He joins us to talk to us about 2 issues. First, the issue of GATT and the issue of the CD. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, and a good morning to you.
Good morning, sir.
Well, so first of all, let's start with the CD. I spoke to you earlier about the challenges of the CD. What is your understanding of what may be causing the nosedive that the CD is experiencing against the major trading currencies?
Yeah, good morning again, Senna, and good morning to your listeners and probably your viewers. We started off last week when we had a discussion on this CD depreciation. we mentioned a number of factors that could account for the trend over the last couple of months. I remember mentioning the strengthening of the dollar so far as the U.S. market and the global market is concerned. The interest rate for the dollar by the Federal Reserve has been stabilized and increased a little bit above the normal. So it makes it stronger than many other currencies, including the cedi. The cedi by itself, according to the monetary policy of Bank of Ghana, is lower in terms of interest, which is about 16%, 70%. Now, the physical side, which is what the Ministry of Finance is using, a margin placed on the monetary policy for the Bank of Ghana makes it about 21% or so. So it makes the cedi a little bit lower in terms of interest for investors to invest in cedi, and then at the end of the day, have to convert a lot more of the cedi currency to acquire the stable and increasing and the strengthened dollar in order to transact business in the global market. So that is a factor which will see as an external factor for that matter. We can put that aside. Then when we come to other external factors, no, we cannot associate any other. I don't see it. The market doesn't show that we have other external factors coming to affect the cedi, because the main external factor we can identify will be the commodity markets externally and our exports. Our resource envelope includes gold, oil, and cocoa, and these are commanding and attracting good revenue from the external market. Unlike years back, 3-4 years back, we have some challenges regarding attracting higher prices for our commodities in the external market. So a lot more revenue is being generated from outside for oil, even though what comes to us in Ghana is about 13%. It's better today than it used to be 3-4 years back. So we are not. We cannot be sure that we are not generating a lot more revenue, but it looks like locally in Ghana, our expenditure envelope, which means current expenditure, is going overboard. We are not producing to export to be able to get more revenue. Meanwhile, the expenditure basket keeps increasing in terms of wages and salaries and other statutory payments. Besides, the interest rates that have accumulated over our loans from the previous years, including the last 2 years, what we have done as a country is taking loans and bonds locally and from the external market with interest to pay. Servicing this interest is also burdening our envelope. Meanwhile, our expenditure envelope. Meanwhile, we are not able to generate local revenue as well as export to attract more revenue in hard currency. So the envelope is not widening, and so it's putting a lot of burden on market players, traders, importers, and what have you, those who are in the industry. So there is a difficulty. There is a difficulty right there.
Can any of these causes that you've identified be traced to the policies of the current government?
Definitely so. definitely so. You see, we can mention one, for example, when we look at the import-export sector. Recently, in the last budget, I believe, we had the government trying to, or pretending to be taking away VAT or reducing taxes by, not increasing the taxes, but meanwhile you're looking for revenue. So what you ended up doing as a country was to go in for a strict tax of 5% and lower down the previous VAT of the 5%. I remember that previously with the VAT, a trader has an input and output of these taxes. So at the end of a period of a cycle, he's able to claim for VAT that he's already paid, provided he falls under a certain threshold. But now that we have slapped a 5%, fixed rate, it's making business expensive. And I think we've read or we have heard from the Association of Ghana Industries complaining about the recent change in the tax schedule that is affecting them. And so, for that matter, business cost is increasing or had increased to by 5%. And the top government will sit with them and try and revise or modify things, but up to now nothing has happened. This is putting a lot of burden on traders, and we very appreciate with this. It's costing a lot of challenges for consumers as well as traders, the middlemen, and all that. You have difficulty importing, and the imports we are making are more of the finished goods. If we were importing finished goods rather than raw materials and capital goods to help produce, help industries, so that we can add value and do some export, that will help. Again, revenue in terms of our reserves, it's not helping. We don't have a lot. We are dwindling, we are waning, and we are not increasing the national reserves so far as the currency is concerned. And the traders are having difficulty with the market forces. The sellers or the hard currencies in the market, they work themselves out. So at the end of the day, you may have to spend more cedis to obtain the few dollars that we have in the market. If we were generating and attracting revenue from the foreign market by our activity in the industry, exporting more of value-added goods, cocoa processing, other agro-processing, and probably cutting down on certain imports that we don't need, like poultry, sugar, rice, flour, and all those things, probably we will be able to reserve or save some currency and use it for other necessary things. But all these, especially the consumer market, the consumer goods, are all chasing. They are all struggling and competing for a few reserves that we have in the market.
Well, having said that, the finance minister has been announcing that perhaps within the next 2 weeks, we'll see the city strengthening because of certain inflows. I believe you've heard some of the sources he's mentioned. Now, at least in the short term, will those help?
Yes. We listened to them. We read something regarding the recent conference, press conference that he had, I believe, a couple of days ago. About 200 from the Ghana Cocoa Board, some additional 300 million. These are all in millions, I must say. And also some 500 million elsewhere that are supposed to come in. You see, the 200 million cocoa money that they are expecting, I believe, or what we are hearing from the industry, is that money was supposed to go to buy certain essentials for the cocoa farmers and cocoa industry in terms of the jute bags, which we could have produced in Ghana. Now we're going to buy that and bring them to Ghana to bag our cocoa. It's ridiculous for Ghana to do that when we have a factory and we could do that for ourselves. So if you're going to swap that money temporarily, by the next season, this money must go to buy the insecticide, the cocoa, and the spraying must go on. So when you take that money, you deprive cocoa board from being essentials that are needed for production of cocoa. So I don't know how that's going to happen. But it means you'll be stifling cocoa board on one hand in terms of the 200 and the 300 too, which you are expecting from those cocoa processing companies who rely on cocoa supply, the bean supply to process. They are being asked to advance, that is refinance, advance that amount to cocoa board, so that by the season the supply will come in to them for their processing. That amount of money, remember, how do we pay it back? We're going to use it to shore up the dollar, probably hold it and then return it within the next couple of months. So in all this, what we are seeing is that it's a short-term program. And at the end of that short term, 3, 4 months, 5 months, at the end of it, what's happening? Are we going to go back to the depreciation trend? It looks like these short gap measures are not helping. Probably some medium to long-term plans would help.
Okay, I'll come to that shortly. Which medium to long-term plan you think government should be considering? But there is the issue of the fact that two of the places he's expecting those inflows from, the Eurobond, and also there's a loan that they are expecting from the Standard Chartered Bank. One of the issues my boss here has been raising, the news editor has been raising, is the reliability of those funds coming in. In fact, the Eurobond is predicted may be affected by the city's performance even against the dollar. So are we sure we'll get those monies like the finance minister is expecting?
Yeah, I'm afraid the Eurobond is not a way to go. We are not attracting subscriptions in the market, in the Eurobond market. The recent Eurobond that we tried to raise in the market, we targeted about 6 point something million. At the end of the day, we ended up in 3 million. So appetite for our bonds are becoming reduced in the market for bonds and even loans. So that is a fear, and the signal is that we can try. The road shows can start. We can try, but I am clear in my mind that we will not be able to reach the target because, again, remember that we are not sure the market. Those who are investing, they are not sure how the dollar CD rate is going to go. So they are holding on to their money and looking at how the economy will perform over the period. So if we are not stable in terms of our currency against other currencies, people are afraid and shy away from trying to invest by way of this Eurobond into our economy. That is the fear. That is why for the last couple of trials in terms of Eurobond, we've not been able to reach the maximum. It used to be the case when we get oversubscribed, so far as Eurobonds are concerned. I remember the 2014, 2015 times to 2016 years, we get oversubscribed. And even the beginning of this new administration, quickly people were scrambled over our Eurobonds, but we've been struggling trying to attract investors into patronizing our Eurobond in the external market. That is a problem. That is a problem. So, but we have no choice than to go for these loans from Standard Chartered and also try the Eurobond and whatever we can get. This is a stopgap measure, and it doesn't build any confidence in the investment community. So it's worrying. It's a worrying trend. But we believe in the expertise and professionalism of our actors, so far as our economic industry is concerned and finance is concerned, we believe they should be able to find a way. I think that consensus building, consultation, it doesn't matter which aisle of the divide you belong to. There are experts out there. Let's open up and be transparent. Let's come and sit at the table and think through exactly how we can surmount these challenges. I believe that is the way to go. You know.
Well, and having said that, unfortunately, we have to jump to the very next topic we'll be talking about under the economic, because we have to let you go shortly. Is the issue of the Ghana Amalgamated Trust. Now, that the sovereign guarantee has been approved by Parliament for the trust. Now, the minority is not in favor of the whole Ghana Amalgamated Trust issue. Should we be worried?
We should be worried. Remember the last time I raised this political risk component of what we are doing. Political risk in the sense that in spite of all the issues and clarity that was required to come to bear on this trust, Ghanaians were denied by way of the minority who raised those questions and other stakeholders in the economy who keeps on asking questions regarding this trust. It's worrying because the regulations and the laws are being breached, being violated, being overlooked, and it's not the way to go. If you look at the banks in question as well, government is owing some of them. They really don't need injection of additional funding. NIB in particular, together with ADB, which are public banks. If you look at their balance sheet and you evaluate the whole companies, you realize that if they sell some of their shares holding in some other areas like NIB, which has some shares in Nestle, they could, go in and then sell some of the shares and be able to recapitalize. Government is owing them for the loans that they advance to contractors to perform government jobs and have not been paid. So how could government turn around and form amalgamated trust, go and look for a loan and come and then inject into the same bank that you are owing?
Okay.
Which has come under
Mr.
your
Alhaji,
wing.
Unfortunately, we would have to leave it here. Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome, Senator. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll continue at that time. Thanks so much.
Well, Richard Ahinija is a banking risk analyst based in the United States of America. Was speaking to us about the issues we'll be talking about with regard to the economy this morning. It's our very first topic for discussion, and that has to do with the performance of the CD and the confidence of the finance minister that that will be reversed within the next 2 weeks, because they are expecting some inflows into the country. And then we'll also be talking about, we'll put that together with the issues in the banking sector and the approval of the sovereign guarantee for the Ghana Amalgamated Trust to raise some monies. And then we'll talk about the potential return of Doomsaw. And then we'll talk about the Milshort Commission's report, the submission of that report, put it together with the President's directive to the AG to enact a law to do with political vigilantism. If you just join us, you are listening to the mother of all talk shows. I welcome you for this morning. Today, like I said, we have a 5-member panel. We have Mr. Kwesi Pratt, Dr. David Percy, Richard Nyama, Emmanuel Wilson, and Comrade Ibrahim Mutala Mohammed. My name is Sena Nobo. Show is produced by Patrick Asford Wade. We are live on Pub MCGH on Facebook if you want to watch us. Alternatively, I've shared the link on my Facebook wall. Just look for Sena Nombo and you can get to watch us live on Facebook. And you can use the internet to listen to us through tunein.com. You can also listen to us on any of our affiliate stations nationwide. And also, we are live on GFM Radio in London. Good morning to all of you. And Let me start off the discussion and start off from Mr. Emmanuel Wilson. Good morning to you.
Sana, good morning. I hope you are doing well.
Oh, by the grace of God, I'm managing.
We thank God. And you are looking very well. I'm sure the week has been so good to you.
God has been good to us.
We thank God.
God has been good to us.
We thank God. We thank God. Good to know. Let me salute my boss, Patrick. One of the best producers we've ever had. You know. And to say a good morning to our listeners, our viewers, and our co-panelists. Nyama, it's been a while, but I'm happy that Patrick has brought us together. Senna, our first discussion, or first topic, before I get into it, permits me to express my condolence, knowing that this program goes across the world, to the families of individuals that were affected in the New Zealand shootings and the massacre. It is such an unfortunate incident, and I'm praying that the authorities there will be able to do the adequate investigation, identify and arrest the person or the culprit, so that the culprit will face the full length of the laws over there. I will also want to express my condolence, because this week hasn't been so good, to the families of all the victims and all the individuals that were affected in the Ethiopian airline crash. Yeah. This is such an unfortunate thing, and all we can say as Christians is that God knows best. Now, having said that, it is important also for me to just mention in passing that as a country, we are really living in dangerous times, because the backbone of every economy and every country depends solely on the security of its members and citizens. Unfortunately, under this government, the government led by His Excellency Akufo-Addo and Bawumia, it is speedily becoming very clear that all of us are not safe. You recall that last month it came out and it was all over, where I was accosted in traffic and my life was threatened. Just this week, unfortunate incidents has taken place. 2 or so have taken place, and one has to do with an individual who is supposed to be a member of parliament, and for that matter, we are supposed to call him honorable, deciding to take the law into his own hands, and goes to the extent of preventing the security service from performing their duties. Goes to the extent, as though this is not enough, goes to the extent of threatening a security officer, letting the whole of the nation be aware that he is above the laws of this country. And what is disheartening is the fact that when the police service decided to deal with this, they rather ended up writing a romantic message in the form of a press release, as though they were so scared of Kennedy Ejapon. They decided to virtually rather apologize to someone who has taken the law into his own hands. I think, yes, our laws are such that significant structures such as the police service and co, or the security services, are to a very large extent being controlled by politicians. But I would still want to entreat and tell the Ghanaians, the security service, particularly the police service, that they should not be intimidated and they should not allow political individuals to intimidate them. There's no one who is above these laws, the laws that governs this country. Just yesterday, it also came out that a man who claimed to be the spiritual father of our president, in the name of Owusu Bempah also, went to one of your sister stations or your colleague stations and decided to go and attack colleague journalists simply because he claimed the journalist has made some pronouncements against him. And I think this is something, if indeed we are living in a rule of law, this is something that all of us need to condemn. And I will want to use this platform to encourage the police that what Owusu Bempah did yesterday amounts to assaults. And so he should be arrested. He should be called, he should be invited, he should be arrested, and the right procedure should be seen taking place. On that note, our first issue, which has to do with the cedi depreciation and the banking sector, issues and what is happening in the banking sector. In the year 2014, now President or Vice President Bawumia, who is in charge or supposed to be in charge of the economic management team of this country, told all of us that when we play with propaganda or we play propaganda with the economy, the cedi depreciation will expose all of us. He states, and I quote, "After being in denial for the last couple of years, the true state of the economy is now obvious for all of us to see. The propaganda has finally given way to reality, and it is not a pretty sight." In the same year, 2014, Bawumia predicts further depreciation of the cedi. And he described the then government as being clueless simply because the cedi is depreciating. So in the words of Bawumia, any leader who is in charge of the economy and is not able to stabilize the cedi, that leader is clueless. In the words of Bawumia, we are not supposed to elect leaders who would not be able to manage our currency. And this was a statement he made in the year 2014. In other words, he came to set the yardstick, the standard, and says that he believes, and as far as he's concerned, any leader who does not manage the currency is a clueless person, and that person doesn't deserve to be a leader. 2018, when he has become the vice president, and that's just some few months ago because this took place the latter part of last year, Bawumia comes out and tells us that the cedi's performance under this government is the best since 2012. I am not sure of the figures, but I'm believing that Nyama will be able to give us the figures for us to compare and to rather to really believe or not whether since 2012 till date this is the best performance we've had. Strangely, when Bawumia came out to say that the cedi's performance under Akufo-Addo is the best since 2012, some weeks after, his boss, President Akufo-Addo, comes out to express worry over the cedi depreciation. And so I'm finding it difficult to juxtapose. I'm finding it difficult to link these two. where a vice president comes to praise the performance of the city. And just some weeks after, his boss comes out to tell us that he's worried over the performance of the city. But you see, if indeed you play propaganda with the economy, the fundamentals, if you don't get it right, not only the cedi depreciation, but all other things will expose you. And that includes insecurity in the system. That includes the unreasonable escalation of the fuel prices. And that includes the messing up of our educational system. And that includes the weakening of almost all sectors in the country. Just some few days ago, I was listening to an analyst, economic, expert, and he comes out to tell us, and that he's predicting that the cedi will depreciate further in the coming months. And that, to me, is so worrying and so alarming. That first, the president, who is supposed to come and give us hope and to tell us the measures that are being implemented or being adhered to, so to strengthen the cedi, he comes out to tell us that he is worried and that he is just in a state where he seems not to know what to do. Then after, just this week, an analyst comes out to also tell us that what we are seeing currently with the cedi is not going to get better, and that we should expect a further depreciation of the cedi in the coming months. I believe that this is something that is so worrying, in that the state of the cedi affects almost everything that we do. And that is the reason why I believe most Ghanaians decided to vote for Akufo-Addo and Bawumia in 2016 during the general election. It is largely because Ghanaians were not happy, including myself, and I'm sure yourself, because all of us were being affected by the weakening of the cedi then. But today, it is very clear that what we are experiencing now is extremely worse than what we were experiencing prior to the 2016 election. Senna, is it possible? I am not an economist, but is it possible that we'll get to a stage where we will be able to have leaders who are in charge of the economy, and we will not be experiencing depreciation of our cedi? What exactly is happening to our cedi that over the past period, and what is worse is that in this past months, the cedi seemed to be out of absolute control? I believe strongly that if we have proactive leaders who are in charge of our economy, leaders who are thinking outside the box, we will be able to manage the cedi. We will be able to strengthen our currency, and we will be able to move out of this hardship that the cedi depreciation is putting on all of us. We all know that we are in a country where we do more importation than exportation. Indeed, the few things that we even export, we export them in the raw states. And what is worrying is that as we export these things in their raw states to foreign lands, they rather add some value to it and bring it back to us in an unreasonable amount. And we are supposed to buy it using their currency. I was personally happy when the president, during his campaign, was all over telling us that he was going to move this economy from the Georgesburg states to a new one. And his definition was that he was going to ensure that the Georgesburg state is where we were producing raw materials, and everything about us was seen in its raw state. And so he was going to move us from that state to the state where we'll be adding value to the raw materials that we produce. And one of the things he indicated, telling us, or he told us he was going to do, was that we were going to build a number of factories. And the rationale for this was to add value to some of the things that we produce in this country. And I thought that it was a laudable idea, because then it will reduce the quantum of importation that we make. Unfortunately, it has become very clear that the president was just giving what has come to stay as political talk. He was just giving us some political campaign messages just to incite and to make people happy. I mean, excite people and the followers. Because as we speak, we've not been able to make reference to even one of the so-called factories. And for me, I think that if as a nation we concentrate on reducing the number of things we bring into this country in the form of importation, and we find a way of depending more on exportation of value-added products, we will as a nation be able to get to the stage where we will then say that our city is becoming stronger and our city is getting to, a stage where it will be competing with other major currencies. I am also believing that if we want to find a way of strengthening our currency, we should as a nation find out how best we can introduce technology into almost all the things that we do. This is a country that depends largely on agricultural activities. Think about 60% plus of the population are told, or we are told, that they engage in agricultural activities. Unfortunately, it is still worrying that most of these activities that we engage ourselves in, we do not apply technology to it. And we are still engaging and using the old methods and the old forms of doing things. I am hoping and I'm believing that if indeed we want to find a lasting solution to this issue, then we should be able to bring in some technological techniques into some of the things that we do, particularly the agricultural sector and the activities that falls under the agric sector. I believe if we are able to concentrate particularly on these two or these three, where we reduce our dependency on importation, where we find a way of increasing our exportation and export activities, where we find a way of introducing relevant technological activities into most of the things that we do in this country, particularly on agriculture, we will be able to get to the stage where we will say that, look, let us, or we will say that now we are confident that our city is becoming stronger And for that matter, this issue of depreciation will be a thing of the past. As a country, there's one other thing that is so worrying, and that is what on the streets they call the dollarization of the economy. You know, most things being done in this country are charged in foreign currencies. You go and you want to engage the services of organizations in this country, and you are being charged in dollars. Why is it that we have all agreed as a nation to use a currency known as the cedi, and yet when services are being rendered, the service providers decide to charge us in dollars, and no one is saying anything about it, forgetting that some of these activities also lead to the weakening of the cedi. And I'm particularly worried at the stage of our cedi, or the level that the cedi is depreciating. Because you see, when the cedi depreciates to this stage, as we have seen, or we are seeing now, it ends up affecting almost everything. Now, the prices of commodities increases. You go to the market to go and purchase a particular item today at an X amount. A week or two you go back and you are told that the price has doubled. And the reason given is that the cedi has been depreciating. And you know, it ends up affecting almost everything. Because though the cedi is depreciating and it is affecting the prices of commodities on the market, the minimum wage still remains. And the total amount of salaries that individuals take home also remains as it is. And so now you are being given X amount of money, and the X amount of money which was valued at a particular value, or which had a particular value, say some weeks back, the same X amount, you take it to the market and you cannot use it to purchase what you were able to purchase some weeks back. And it ends up affecting almost everything around you. And so, for me, what has happened over the past 2016, prior to 2016 election, and now, it has become very clear. And I would have wished that Bawumia will come out to apologize to Ghanaians. It has become very clear that issues of cedi depreciating or appreciating should not really be used as a political tool.
Okay, so please.
Because we should find a way. I know, because now we have a lot of people, you know, I mean, we have more than the usual number. So I'm going to wrap up on this. But what I'm saying is that we should go beyond the usage of the cedi depreciating as a political propaganda or political tool, which clearly was being used by Bawumia. And you see, the reality has exposed not just the Akufo-Addo's government, but unfortunately it is affecting everyone, individuals who are not even partisan. It is affecting everyone who is in this country. And so, as a nation, I believe that if we are able to have a different look at our activities and give a different approach to how we handle the cedi in terms of how we look at our economic activities, the importation, the exportation, introducing technology into our activities locally and all that, we will be able to strengthen our cedi at a point. I'll use this as my initial comment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. Richard Miyama. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. First time.
Yes. Let me say a special thank you to you for the opportunity. And let me also say good morning to listeners out there. There are a number of factors that causes the cedi to depreciate. Let me use this analogy and say that currency is like shares. You know, when there's a limited liability company, especially the ones listed on public stock, people can buy shares in it. And so when you owe shares in that company, you can equate it to owing, let's say, a cedi. You are owing a share of Ghana's value. Okay. Now, you may have noticed that on the public stock market, especially in the advanced economies, a number of factors can cause your share value to either go up or go down. Okay, so if people have the perception that the company is doing very well, they want to come and buy your share so that when you declare dividend, they will also get a benefit of that dividend. Similarly, when people have the perception that your company is going to go into crisis, they begin to sell the shares they have in your company. And when they begin to sell the shares they have, it reduces the share value. Okay, so quite apart from the import and export that we know, the currency is also affected by the perceptions that people have about the economy. Okay, and I'm trying to place into context what I believe is the cause of the fall of the cedi as we have it now. Of course, we all know that if we are able to work and export more than we import, it is a panacea to the devaluation of the cedi. But you cannot talk about import and export just like that. You have to place it in context at all times, because it's about how much cedi people are looking for at a point in time and how much dollar people are looking for at any point in time. I believe that in the past few months, a lot of things have happened in this economy which has dampened the value people had in our economy. Therefore, people are naturally trying to change their investments or their money that they had in Ghana into dollars and take them out of the system. In fact, some people are not even taking it out of the system, but they just feel that if they bought dollars and kept it, it will be worthwhile than keeping their monies in the system here in Ghana. And I'll mention a number of these issues and and explain myself. Principal among these issues is what I call the mishandling of the banking sector cleanup. Mind you, I am not in any way saying that Bank of Ghana shouldn't clean up the banking sector if there's a mess. But I believe their approach was a failure, especially when it comes to the PR work that they did or refused to do about the cleanup that they did. I believe that the PR was handled very poorly. And so at the end of the day, no matter the good intentions they had about cleaning up the banking sector, they ended up causing a big mess. And so today, we have a number of people who do not believe that their money is safe in the banking sector. And so instead of keeping the money in the banking sector, they would rather purchase dollars and keep those dollars either in their safes at home or in other places that they feel would be much more safe. And of course, the moment there's a higher demand for the dollar in such a way, then straight away you know that the value of the dollar is going to increase against the cedi. Because I started by telling you that the currency, the cedi we hold, it is a share that you are owing in Ghana, that you are holding. Okay? And that share value can either rise or drop depending on what the market thinks about the performance of the economy of Ghana. What the market thinks, in fact, may be perception, but perceptions are as real as fact when you get into this market economy and bonds and all of those things. People's perceptions about you are sometimes as real as the fact, and they contribute a lot to how well you do. And so here we have a financial sector after the cleanup, which has lost so much credibility that people are no longer interested in keeping their value or their share of the cedi in that financial sector. Okay, and I have mentioned the first effect. The first effect is that they are buying the dollars and keeping it in their rooms. Now, when people are not keeping their money in the banking sector or in the mainstream financial center, it also creates what we call liquidity challenges. Okay, because as a matter of fact, at any point in time, the amount or the total number of currency that the Bank of Ghana would have printed is nowhere equal to the total number of value that people have. Okay, so if, for example, you put all the banks we have together and all their deposits, okay, are, let's say, 100 billion Ghana cedis, it doesn't mean that Bank of Ghana has actually printed 100 billion Ghana cedis currency that is sitting somewhere. That's not how it works. For all you know, they might have printed just 2 billion Ghana cedis worth of currency. Okay, but when this 2 billion is in the system and it is being circulated, because I go and deposit, you go and withdraw, it is given to you. Another person goes to take loan out of it to do some business, create more value, and bring it back into the system. So once there is circulation, okay, then there's trust in the system, and then it also affects industry positively, because industry will now also have money to be able to do what they do. Okay, so here we are. People have taken their money out of the banking sector. They are keeping them either in their safes or wherever they want to keep, and in dollars. The industry is also not get money to operate. Okay, and when the industry is not getting money to operate, another effect of that is that even the small amount of products that we could have produced to export also begins to reduce. Okay, so the number of things that we could have produced and export are reducing because industry is not getting money to produce enough, and so it is even going to affect our balance sheet the more, therefore causing further devaluation of the currency. Okay, so as we speak now, yes, we have heard Bank of Ghana is trying to inject 800 million into the system to stabilize the cedi and all of those things. You remember when PLO Lumumba was in Ghana, I think sometime in 2016, he said that kind of solution to the devaluation of African currencies is called voodoo economics. Okay, because it is not sustainable in the long term. What are you doing? Does Bank of Ghana print dollar? The answer is no. Bank of Ghana doesn't print dollar. The currency that belongs to Bank of Ghana is cedi. It is cedi that the Bank of Ghana has power over. So if Bank of Ghana is saying we are going to inject money, dollars into the system, where are they going to get the dollars from? You understand? It means you are going to borrow it from somewhere to come and inject into the system to temporarily cause some stabilization. And the moment it is time for you to go and repay that loan, the fall will continue. How long are we going to borrow to come and inject into the system to stabilize? To me, it is not going to work. Okay, so yes, I think that the poor handling of the economy, especially the financial sector, has contributed a lot more to the current depreciation of the cedi that we are doing. And I don't know how it is going to be reversed, because the impact of the banking sector crisis is still rolling out. It's like a snowball effect, and it has not ended yet. The fallouts and the problems that it created in the system are still present, and in some cases are even escalating. So I don't know how they are going to reverse that for now. But if we want to talk about a general solution to appreciation of our cedi, then the solution does not lie in the hands of Bank of Ghana. It lies in the hands of the managers of the economy, the politicians in the helm of affairs. And the solution is discipline. The solution is discipline. Look, we all heard about the Ethiopian airline that crashed a week ago. Quite unfortunate. About 157 people lost their lives. Okay. That was the second time that particular kind of aircraft had been engaged in an accident within 6 months of its introduction onto the airspace. And so it was quite a big source of worry for major players in the world of airline transport. You would notice that soon after the second crash, which was in Ethiopia, a number of countries around the world immediately halted or grounded that particular flight from flying over their airspace. Okay, but there is something I noticed that people may not have noticed. The United States or the US government was the last government to ban this aircraft. Why? If you looked at their initial statement, you could tell that they were not even willing to ban it, because they came out earlier on to come and say that, look, yes, we have seen that the aircraft has caused blah 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 blah, but we believe it is a minor software defect, and the US government is working with Boeing in order to rectify that software defect, so we don't believe it is time to ban it yet. It took all other countries, including Canada, to ban it before US finally decided to ban it, I think yesterday or so. What am I talking about? I'm talking about government's approach to the protection of companies that are within their economy. Okay? And the US is very good at that, always trying to protect their own economy. And so their dollar will always be stable and appreciate. What has been Ghana government's approach? Okay? Again, when we get back to this banking crisis, you would notice that some of the banks that were taken over compulsorily, okay, even though the owners were largely Ghanaians, there were foreign investors in there. And in fact, when Bank of Ghana said they were raising the minimum capital to 400 billion, these foreign investors actually pumped in money in an attempt to help them to reach the 400 million. Then all of a sudden, they said it has been taken over. So the money they pumped into it has been consumed and taken over. So if you are one of them, how would you feel? And if you are also a foreigner and you know that other foreigners have gone to invest in this economy and their monies have been taken over in that style, would you be comfortable to come and invest in the economy again? And so we are seeing, people repatriating their investments out of the country. And it is going to affect the the cedi dollar relationship. Unfortunately, it is going to get worse. And once it is getting worse, a lot of things are going to go up. I know we are going to talk about the energy crisis, but you see, if the dollar is going up in an economy like this, where today about 80% of our power generation is from crude oil, because we use power plants instead of renewable sources of energy to provide electricity. If dollar is going up, then you can be sure what will be happening in the power sector too. And if the power sector is also going to, present higher tariffs, then what is going to happen to the one district, one factory? Because every factory needs power to work. So for me, I am not comfortable at the turn of events. I believe that those in the helm of affairs are knowledgeable. At least we have been made to believe so, and they understand what they are doing. So what I can do now is to appeal to them to sit down and review their strategy, because I don't think we are heading for the better.
Well, thank you very much. Richard Niyama is the Executive Director of the Progressive People's Party. If you just don't know, you're listening to the mother of all talk shows, Alhaji and Alhaji. Before I go to Comrade Murtala Ibrahim Mohammed, let me just run through a couple of the messages you're sending to us through the PAP MCGH platform. Don't forget, you can also reach us through WhatsApp. You can send a WhatsApp message to 0233 995905, 0233 995905. And this one from CJ says, Senna, please remind those who Bempa of the words of the true prophet of God, Bob Nestamali, and ponder over this. Thus, when you get down and you quarrel every day, it's like saying prayers to the devil. King Farouk says, CD depreciation affecting my sexual performance. That's a quote attributed to Honorable Kennedy Ejapong. And Charles Nyami Asamankese says, these are 3 more reasons why this MPP government must not be retained come 2020. Whereas NDC came to build university, MPP is in and closing them. John Mahama came to fix our energy sector problems. Akufo-Addo can't just maintain it, but rather sending us back to doom so. And the third one is NDC government work for Ghanaians to progress, but the MPP government only talk for Ghanaians to suffer. And coming from Charles says, a happy birthday to his son, Lord Nana Akese Nyami, who turns 1 today. Prekese Kwame says the ejaculation of the dollar exchange rate has clearly revealed the low sperm count status of the CD. Now, the CD has successfully escaped the $2.25 billion artificial chem bond sale created on assumption of office. The untold story here is that we'll still be paying annual interest of $444 million. That's 19.75% to the friends of Ken Ofo-Yatta over a 15-year period. And the sad aspect of all is that we have nothing to show for it. The money evaporated from the much-touted international reserve like LPG. Isn't that from Kasua Old Barrier? Musa Abatua from Kumasi says, Senna, on 4th May 2016, this was what President Akufo-Addo said, and I quote, the current depreciation of the Ghana cedis against the US dollar is because of bad leadership. We should not be where we are today to buy a dollar for 3.72 cedis. Vote for change, unquote. 2 years in office, the dollar is now 5.85 to the cedi. So Ghanaians should use his yardstick to vote against the MPP come 2020. However, President Akufo-Addo has no excuse to plug this nation into darkness because GM handed over a secure power plants for him. If you do propaganda power, the doomsaw will expose you. Ayub Farouk in Tamale says, good morning to you, Senna, and to your panelists. Quoting from Nana Akufo-Addo when in opposition, the current depreciation of the cedi against the US dollar is because of bad leadership. We should not be where we are today to buy a dollar for 3.72. Vote for change. I rest my case. Ekan McLean Erickson says, good morning, Senna. Look, whatever that happened to Mugabe isn't an individual attack, but an attack on the NDC party. It's a threat to everyone in the family of the NDC party. But you know what, Senna? Our leaders are stumbling, shivering, and shaking in the eyes of the NPP. The NPP have lost the elections in advance, and so they are introducing all those kinds of intimidating tactics. And unfortunately, my party leaders, elders, executives are being soaked with it. The most worrying case is that most of us at the base pick up information in diverse, and when we call our executives to give them information on what the MPP is putting in place, they refuse to answer our calls, text messages and WhatsApp messages. I salute my regional chairman, Bunas, in the Upper West region, Kwame CDT Ahafo Chingsua says, ex-President Mahama laid solid foundation on the energy sector before he left office and handed over a secure power plant to Ekofo-Addo. Dumso was never nationwide under Mahama, as we are seeing now. Maintain it, Keke. You can't. Habib Bantu says, good morning to you, Senna, and your cherished listeners around the world. Firstly, my condolences to all Muslims around the world for the cowardice acts perpetrated on our brothers and sisters in New Zealand. Secondly, when it comes to Ghanaian economy, the center cannot hold, so things will fall apart. Today, the cedi has become the cheapest currency in the world. Where is Dr. Baumia, the PhD holder in economics? Funny enough, he has failed us woefully. God save us. Odinehun Deborah says, good morning, Senna. I want to hear from Nanado that he says he's going to enact law to disband vigilantism. What about those whom he has employed as national security officers? Is he going to sack them? Or he sent down from Teshigono School. Kenneth D. Apenya says this government doesn't have any reasonable knowledge to govern our dear country. So a couple of those messages coming in. A.U. Farouk in Tamale again says, good morning to you, Senna, and to your panelists. Quoting from, I've read that already. And so those are just some of the messages coming in through the PAP MC GH platform. We had a couple through our WhatsApp platform. Says, good morning. This is from Jonathan in Dansuma. Says, good morning. Incapable Dr. Baumia and Akufo-Addo. What is happening to the economy and the city? Did the incompetent people come back to take over the country, or the two of you are still in charge? And you are still borrowing and taxing Ghanaians? Have you now also become lazy nemesis indeed? The chickens have come home to roost on a guava tree. Next week, I will share with you the difference between an incompetent and incapable man. So those are just some of the messages you are sending to us. Comrade.
Senna, good morning to your cherished listeners, and of course those who follow you on PAP MCG.
Yes.
And also, let me also say good morning to my senior comrade Kwesi Pratt, and my other two comrades who happen to be my kid brothers, and of course your good self. I think that everybody in this country, it is obvious that we can all see the ship going to pieces, or at least is fragments. No vision, no method, no plan, no nothing. That is the best way you can describe the state of this nation. I think that the two earlier panelists have done extremely well on the matter of the crisis that we are confronted with as a people. Only to add that these are crises that could have been avoided. These are crises that everybody knows, that we are where we are because of the inability of the people who are given the mandate to govern us to control their uncontrollable ego. I am picking information that the current Minister of Finance, indeed in private discussion, had actually boasted that he was going to deal with certain banks. And there's no denying the fact that what they did to Unibank and the other banks is a classical example and confirmation of this rumor that is being peddled out there. Even if it remains a rumor, the actions and inactions of the Minister of Finance and this government entirely points to that. Thank God that some of the banks have actually resorted to the legal process to look at the circumstances under which the decisions that were taken indeed were taken. Senna, in this country, what was shocking to me, and I believe to many people, is that these local and indigenous banks are being collapsed deliberately to pave way, not only for the parochial interests of the Minister of Finance and his uncle, but to pave way for the foreign banks to strive. And I can tell you that almost all the operatives of the foreign banks, but at least their leadership, are happy about what has happened to these domestic banks. I'm not saying that we should not enforce the laws. That is not what I'm suggesting a bit. But what I'm saying is that we needed to have contextualized the circumstances and look at the operation of those domestic banks vis-a-vis the other foreign banks. You are dealing with banks that are willing to extend, if you like, loan facilities to businesses that may not have certain collaterals that are hugely demanded by these foreign banks. You are dealing with banks that were operating to a very large extent with small and medium scale enterprises who were operating with the young man and the young woman who sells at Kantamanto, operating with the hawkers on the street of Accra, operating with the small businesses that are operating in the whole market, operating in the Tamale market, operating in the Malata market. You are dealing with banks that were willing, regardless the risks involved, to extend loan facilities to these people who are already struggling because of the economic quagmire that this country is subjected to under this government. These were the kinds of people the banks were dealing with. To that extent, that they may indeed be exposed to certain risks that these already established foreign banks who are making so much profit on us in this country may not be indeed subjected to. So if you wanted to look at the circumstances and you wanted to go by the spirit of the rules and regulations govern the conduct of businesses, particularly in the banking sector, you are bound to have some of these challenges that you have. Don't we have problems with this government? Don't we have problems with ministries and agencies? And some of the problems we have are hugely unacceptable. Must we say because this government is inept? Must we say because we are confronted with problems of security, we are confronted with basic provisions of services for the Ghanaian people, we must indeed close down certain ministries or entirely the government should collapse? No! We have those challenges, and then we are looking at the enormity of the challenges that are confronting us and the ability of government to indeed overcome those challenges. And I thought that government would have been a bit considerate in looking at one, enforcing the laws, but giving people the opportunity to see whether they can be supported to indeed come on stream. How can you spend about 18 billion to collapse banks? It simply doesn't make sense. You are spending 18 billion to collapse banks. Does it make sense? Now the question is that 18 billion, if you had extended it to those banks, if you had given those 18 billions as support to those banks, would they have been in a better position that would be considered acceptable by government? My answer is yes. My answer is yes. Now look at the difference. One would say that no, they need to enforce the law. They need to collapse those banks. Yet we spend that money, those banks are gone. We are not even getting the solution. Collapsing of the banks is not a Cincinnatus to the challenges that we are confronted with in the banking sector as a government. But if you had provided that facility, if you had provided the money to those banks, the people, hundreds, if not thousands, who have lost their livelihood as a result of this insensitive decision, those people would have still been on their jobs. In this country, we have had palpable evidences of young people who have lost their lives as a result of the collapse of the banks. Now, aside even those losing their lives, 3 banks alone, we had over 7,000 people who lost their jobs. Multiply that 7,000 by 3. Just even say that they each have an average of 2 dependents. Multiply the 7,000 by 3, you are talking about 21,000 Ghanaians who indeed would have lost their jobs. And after that, we had other banks that were collapsed. We have had businesses that were collapsed as a result of the collapse of those banks. And you had this rush of people getting into the banks to take their money. Some of the banks indeed suffered this fate because you have a governor of Bank of Ghana who knows nothing to what he was appointed to do. And if I can quote Honorable Adongo, that he talks too much. The governor of Bank of Ghana talks too much. And it's true, when the governor of Bank of Ghana sneezes, the entire banking sector and the entire economy catches cold. And that is what happens. Then you have a governor of Bank of Ghana who does politics than even operating as a governor of a bank such as the Bank of Ghana. So that is the issue. You spend 18 billion to collapse banks. Now, a lot of these banks, at least most of them, government was indebted to them. Contractors indeed actually went to those banks for loans. And like I said, the kinds of loans that can be extended to businesses, small businesses in this country, can only be done by these domestic banks, because the foreign banks are unwilling, they are unprepared to do that. They will not accept those risks because they are not Ghanaian in the first place. The responsibility they have is not to the Ghanaian people. That responsibility is to their owners, and their owners certainly are not in Ghana. Sana, I think that before I proceed, let me join my brother to also extend my sincere condolences to the barbarous murder of our brothers and sisters in New Zealand. And we are all witnesses to the fact that they were 2 mosques that were attacked. And for me, this is a reminder to all of us that when we talk about terrorism, it's not a religious thing. When we talk about terrorism, it's a human thing. There are certain human beings who don't behave like human beings. And because people take religion as, they know the passion with which people indeed accept religion. So if they want to get support, they use religion as a basis for which they unleash the terror. For the first time, I have seen some of the international media who can no longer say that this is just a right-wing, or a mental dementia individual who had indeed gone to unleash violence on. For the first time, they could not do anything than to describe this as terror act. We have had such incidences, and they were unwilling to indeed describe them as terror act because they were not committed by Muslims. And I think that for me, it's a reminder to all of us, whether Muslims or Christians or Zoroastrians or Hindus or Buddhists, this is an attack on humanity. So when we have such, let's link the religious persuasion of the people who engage in it and look at the act itself and see how we can all confront them. Terrorism acts, and the number of people it has killed in the world has killed more Muslims than any other people. The thousands of people who are killed in Yemen, the thousands of people who are killed in Syria, these are Muslims. Sadly, the Western world, the very arms that are being used to kill these people are provided by the United States of America and many countries within the European Union, particularly the United Kingdom. We have seen what is happening in Yemen. Those arms are provided not just by any other person, but because of profit motive, and people do that. So I think that it is, for me, sadly as this may be, and our profound and sincere condolences to the bereaved family, for me it's a reminder to all of us that to begin confronting it, because the moment we begin to look at it as a religious thing, then we lose the point. And that is what these terrorists want. They want to have a clash of civilization. They want to clash religions upon religions, civilizations upon civilizations. So they will do that. Now if they attack and they say Allahu Akbar, they do those things, hey, people will say that Muslims have engaged in it, when in actual fact those people are not even proper and practicing Muslims. You have a right wing who has done that. And for me, the rhetoric globally, the rhetoric that comes from certain leaders who are supposed to be responsible, the likes of Donald Trump, for me, is a reminder that such statements mean a lot, and they can trigger something that we all not will be willing and expecting to have. So our condolences to them. But let me come to the point of discussion. Now, if you do politics with the exchange rate in a country that is hugely import dependent, then you have a problem. I think that quotations have been made about the statement that was made by Dr. Baumia when he said that if the fundamentals of the economy are weak, the exchange rate will expose you. I'm wondering whether my senior brother is still in this country, and I'm wondering what has happened to the needless lectures that he engaged in, which was supported by Pastor Mensa Otabil, and that indeed who provided opportunity for him and use his university to do politics. When you had people who used the pulpit and in fact to do politics. The current minister for education in charge of tertiary education, who was the pro-vice chancellor at that time of Central University, they made this opportunity. And I'm wondering whether they have moved to, if I can borrow senior comrade Kosumokaya, if they still live in this country, I think that Ghanaians will be more than willing to listen to them now more than ever as to the state of the economy. Now you have a government that is visionless, and you have a government that would not hesitate to boast and praise themselves. I have seen a video where Dr. Baumia and they started mentioning titles. We have Professor this, we have Dr. this, we have Dr. this, and these are the solid people who are managing the economy. And when I watched that video, I said Dr. Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah was indeed absolutely right when he described the Buza Dankwa tradition, that they are people with narrow intellectual and political horizons, but they always see themselves as the leading stars. At any point in time, they have the brains. At any point in time, they were created by God to govern this country. That any other group of persons who are given the opportunity by the Ghanaian people to govern, does so as a result of fluke. And clearly, with all these so-called big titles, for me, I don't think that our economy should be in the state in which we are. And that is why I premise my statement by saying that we have all seen the ship wrecking. At least it's fragment. No plan, no vision, no method, no nothing. Now, in this country, the NDC government under President Mahama demonstrated what we call visionary leadership. And let's ask ourselves the things that the NDC did under President Mahama, what has happened to those things? And how come that within a period of 2 years we are where we are? President Mahama indeed realized, and I will provide evidences, that we were spending so much money in the importation of rice in this country. Every other Ghanaian indeed eats rice. Every other Ghanaian. And I believe that 2 out of every Ghanaian would take rice at least once a day. There are some people who take rice at least 3 times a day. Some take rice 2 times a day. The extent to which we eat so much rice in this country and then we do not produce enough to support our consumption needs. President Mahama and the NDC came with a plan. And that plan was to see how best we can boost the production of local rice and reduce the importation of rice, foreign rice, into this country. And that is the reason why in 2014 we had a reduction in the importation of rice in this country by 40%. 40%. And an increase in the production of local rice by 60%. So what has come to it? In fact, 2016, and I can say that as recent as 7th January 2017, the very day this super incompetent and super corrupt government was being sworn in, we were spending close to $500 million in the importation of rice in this country. Within 2 years, we are spending over $1 billion in the importation of rice into Ghana. Over $1 billion within 2 years. What has happened? What were the measures put in place by the Ministry of Trade, which I proudly serve as a deputy minister? The measures we put in place in conjunction with other ministries, customs and the Ministry of Finance, to ensure that there was a reduction in the importation of rice into this country. Where are those measures? And I ask this super incompetent government these questions. And you see, when we had in 2014 a reduction of the importation of rice into this country by 40% and a production of local rice by 60%, you can see the correlation. Because there is one thing having a reduction in the importation of rice in this country, and there's another thing having a reduction in the production of rice. But the fact that there was a reduction in the importation of rice and there was a surge in the production of local rice in this country, what it means is that more and more Ghanaians indeed developed the taste of consuming rice that was produced in this country. So how come that within a period of 2 years we had quadrupled the amount of money, in fact we had doubled the amount of money that we use in the importation of rice in this country? So you can imagine how much $500 million could be done to this economy. $500 million being taken out of this country every year. Granted that the $500 million that we were spending in the importation of rice each year in this country was static. Now what it then means is that we are taking $1 billion out of this country to bring in rice in this country. Now what has happened to our very rice production? This government indeed abandoned it. The other initiative, a lot of those who came, foreign rice farmers or producers who came and engaged in it, a lot of them are folding up. And they are folding up because the taxes are just unacceptable. And 2, now if you allow people to bring in rice into this country because they finance your party when you were in opposition and they bring in those rice at cheaper cost, what would happen to local industries? They will not be able to compete. Because these are firms that are starting, they produce at higher cost, and therefore prices of what they produce may be higher than rice that are brought in by these importers from cheap and big farms, because they enjoy economies of scale. So if an industry or a firm enjoys economies of scale, it will produce at a lower cost, and by extension the prices of what they produce will also be very low. So they cannot compete, and that is the reason why the surge in the importation of foreign rice into this country has a direct consequence on the production of local rice in Ghana. And I can tell you, a lot of them are folding up. Now, when President Mahama also realized that we're spending so much money, in this country in the importation of drugs, when we had pharmaceutical companies, those pharmaceutical companies indeed produce drugs that were certified by the WHO to be quality and standard drugs that could be used anywhere in the world. The challenge that we identified that these pharmaceutical companies were facing, and these things were started under the leadership of Honorable Haruna Idrisu when he was the Minister for Trade. Some direct funding or assistance financially were given to these pharmaceutical companies, because the difficulty they had was not just about the quality of the product, but it had to do with the capacity to produce enough to feed even the domestic market. Direct 5 million Ghana cedis at that time each was given to these pharmaceutical companies to help them expand production. And I can tell you, within the period of 2 to 3 years, there was indeed a reduction in the amount of money that we were using in the importation of drugs in this country. What has happened to this? Everything, we have gone back to 0.0, because there were a lot of imported pharmaceutical companies in this country, importers of pharmacies in this country, who were financing the NPP. And because they were financing them, they didn't care what happens to the economy. What they did was that they frustrated these pharmaceutical companies and bolstered the importers of these drugs or pharmaceutical products into this country. So if we're making some money because we had reduced the importation of pharmaceutical products into this country because there was a direct government intervention, this government says, no, let's go back because these were people who were financing our party and therefore we must support them. I mean, this is also another challenge. And you know how much we'll be spending now in the importation of drugs into this country? In billions, not cedis, in dollars. Now, when President Mahama indeed extended this facility to these pharmaceutical companies, we then realized that a lot of them spend so much money in the importation of sugar. Because many people think that sugar is just about the domestic consumption. In fact, about 60% of pharmaceutical products are used, are done through using sugar. So we came out with the Commander Sugar Factory project. And I have listened to this noise every single day. We went in for a facility. And we got the facility from the Indian Exim Bank. And you remember when we wanted to do this, the entire minority, the NPP at that time, held a press conference. Because they felt that the people of Central Region were undeserving of a sugar factory. They condemned it. They even made bizarre statement and said that the factory was closer to the sea and that if you do that, it would affect it, the factory wouldn't last. Now, this facility was in 2 tranches. The first one was to be used to put up the factory. The other one was to be used for the production of the raw materials. I have listened to some funny comments that are made by so-called, if you like, civil society groups and independent neutrals. That why is it that we didn't start the production of looking for the raw materials before putting up the factory? A factory whose construction was going to take 2 to 3 years. When you plant sugarcane, it takes maximum 6 to 7 months for you to harvest. So what they were suggesting was that forget of the factory, start producing the sugarcane. When you produce the sugarcane, 7 months, leave it there. Then you start again another 7 months, leave the sugarcane there, until you start indeed putting up the factory and then use it. Mind you, the water content in the sugarcane is what is being used to produce the sugar. Now buy even sugarcane and put it down for 1 month and see whether the water will still be in the sugarcane. Now the NDC put up this factory, which was going to generate a lot of energy and in fact create jobs and provide some energy for the use of the people in Central Region. Now when the NDC went for this Exim Bank, the contractor indeed finished putting up the factory 6 months ahead of the scheduled date. Now if you give a contractor a contract to do something, once he finishes, he will hand over. And in handing over, he has to test run. So that test run was actually done. Sugar was actually produced. And I remember Captain Smart, who indeed went there with other media houses, including Radio Gold. You saw the sugar that was produced. Now when it did that, then we then said that there was going to be a respite because sugarcane is produced everywhere in the world. You use about 6-7 months to produce and you use the other months for maintenance. So when we did this, now we then started the other process to get the $24 million loan for the production of the sugarcane to feed this factory. We didn't just do that. We had in fact gotten land. We started planting the nursery, the seedlings, to feed this. And by October 2016, Parliament had approved the $24 million loan facility from the Indian Exim Bank. As we sit today, this government refused to access that money. Yet you come out and you tell us that we put up a factory when we didn't take steps to ensure that we had these raw materials to feed the factory. That is absolutely not true. If government had gone in, because if we approved the loan facility, you just needed to follow suit with the technical papers and other things, then the monies are released. By March, February, April 2016, the money should have been released. The planting, the nursery, the things we did have all destroyed. Recently, some media houses went and took pictures of this the factory. The materials are rusting. And you know why President Mahama did that? President Mahama said that, look, even if the sugar that is going to be produced by this factory will not be enough to feed the domestic market, but at least the pharmaceutical companies with whom we have extended some financial facilities to won't spend the money to import sugar. They will spend the money to buy the sugar that is produced by the Commander Sugar Factory. So invariably, you create jobs in the area. The money that you have given to them, they will not spend the money to import sugar. They will use the money to buy the sugar that is produced by the Commander Sugar Factory. And some of the breweries would have also taken opportunity to buy the sugar from this place. That thing is standing there. They care less how much is being spent, and what they do is that they deceive the people of this country. And in this country, the very neutrals are no longer talking. And those who even have the courage to speak out against the unabated ills of this country, they have devised what is described as McCarthyism. And that McCarthyism is done by the very media against another media. It's like wolves. If you have a media man or a journalist who stands up to the task and speaks against the ills of this government, such a media person is targeted. And that is the state of our country today. That is the state. So if you imagine the amount of money that we spend in importing rice, the amount of money that we spend in importing pharmaceutical products in this country, the amount of money that we spend in importing sugar alone, forget of any other thing. The amount of money we spend in importing this product into this country, you can imagine how much you would have been saving. And it is a simple logic. Because when you are buying those things, you don't buy them with cedis. You mop up the few dollars in circulation to be able to bring in those ones. Now, when you do that, the simple law of demand and supply comes in. The higher the supply, the lower the price. And the lower the supply, the higher the price. So when you take away the few dollars and other foreign currencies you have in circulation, what happens? You reduce the liquidity of those foreign currencies in circulation. Many people who want to import are running after those items, after the fewer dollars and other foreign currency. So there will be competition. And when there is competition, there is pressure exerted on it. And those who have them, what do? They increase the value of it. And invariably, the value of your domestic currency comes down. Let me come back to this last point. Now, when we had the trade facilitation bill, which Dr. Bawumia consistently lies, and I say this without any apology, you came into office and less than 4 months, you came out and said that you had introduced a paperless system. What is paperless? He doesn't even appreciate what he talks about. We had to do this because the NPP under President Kufuor for 8 years, they could not pass the International Trade Bill and the International Trade Trade Commission Bill. And the purpose of that was to protect our domestic industries and indeed boost and encourage trade. Now, what happened was that we had this, and it was just automation. What he described as paperless is nothing but trade facilitation. Because we realized that there were demorages. We were spending over $100 million every year in demorages as a result of delay in having goods cleared at the port. The current Deputy Minister for Trade, my good friend Carlos Ahinkra, was the one who represented the freight forwarders, and I was asked by my minister to lead that particular team. And the purpose of it was to see how we could reduce the number of days or weeks or months people spend in having their goods cleared. Fantastic ideas were brought by players in the industry, including Carlos Ahinkra, because he was representing the freight forwarders. Now, when we had all these discussions done, we realized that customs alone, you needed to go through 3 checkpoints to have your goods cleared. And we also realized that a lot of the agencies operating within the port were doing so as a result of legislative instruments. So you go to the port, you have immigration, you have veterinary, you have standard authority, you have food and drugs authority, you have the national security, you have police, you have all manner of people there. And when you have your goods, they would all have to check those goods before you have them cleared. So we realized that there was a Ghanaian woman by name Valentina, whose company was the West Blue Consult. That woman had done a fantastic work in Nigeria. Nigeria's economy is several folds bigger than ours. Their volume of import and export is several folds bigger than ours. So I led the tax team. My minister asked me, we went there and we saw the work the woman did. So as a result of all the meetings and the discussions we had, this woman was given the contract to do so. And she started indeed putting these agencies on the system. such that by the time you have your goods arrive, you would have gone through all the processes. So when the goods finally arrive, you don't need more than 24 hours to have the goods cleared. This is simply what Dr. Bawumia goes about describing as paperless. Now, when we did this, we launched it 2 times. One was at the airport and one was at the customs head office. It was left with just one agency. By the time we handed over on the 7th January, that agency was also uploaded on the system. We never envisaged at any point in time that we're going to increase charges at the ports as a result of the trade facilitation. You know what they did? When they came, they hounded this woman, they hounded the company, because that company, indeed, that contract was entered into between the company and the NDC government. They hounded the woman. The woman had to sell the company to Dubarians from Arab, who care less about what happens to our economy, who care less about what happens to our importers and exporters, who care less about how Ghanaians are struggling. Those Dubarians are not for the Christmas. Those Dubarians are interested in minimizing costs and maximizing profit for Dubai. That was what they did. A government that claims that Ghana beyond AIDS, a government that claims that their interest is to see how they can support domestic industries in this country. The woman had to sell the company to the Dubarians. And that is the reason why people are struggling, because there are extra charges that are being put on for people to have their goods cleared. Thank God that the very people who are crying most were those who contributed 200,000 Ghana cedis to Nanado's campaign. I am told they are demanding that the MPP release their 200,000 Ghana cedis to them. You have Abraham Kumsen, who said that they have even asked their members to fast because they can't survive under this economy. Now you have the Minister of Finance who says that they are going to inject $800 million into the system. Sorry, it can't solve the problem. Because the fundamentals are that all the steps and the measures, I'm not saying they were absolute. I'm not saying that what President Mahama and the NDC did was absolute, the extent to which it could have provided, a solution to all our challenges. But it was a giant step. We took 2 steps back forward, the MPP came and they took 10 steps backwards. Now all those things, if you had continued and also came out with other policy decisions formulated to see how we could encourage the existing policy implementation, that indeed started yielding some results, I don't think it would have been where we are. You can inject $1 billion into the system. As long as people still go through the challenges we go through, the respite will just happen for 2-3 months. And I'm telling you, we'll go back. Ghanaians have the opportunity. And the opportunity the people of this country have is not to make the mistake we made in the 2016 election. Vote out this government. And I have said that they have quadrupled everything. President Nana Addo has perfected corruption. His entire government indeed has perfected corruption. And I really don't think that that is what Ghanaians begin for. So we have an opportunity, and that opportunity cannot be gotten on a silver platter. The NDC and the leadership, including all of us, must realize that we have a moral duty and a responsibility. These elections we are getting into is not about NDC, NPP. It's about salvaging this country from economic bondage and servitude. Well, that is what we have to do.
Thank you, comrade. Let me bring in Kwesi. Mr. Brad. To allow Dr. Percy to settle.
How long does he need to settle? And why does he choose to come 1 hour late?
He's eating.
Because he's also caught me in the West. This is not the normal practice.
Which one do you want?
So I was also caught unawares. Anyway, my microphone is not even on.
It's on now.
Well, I've also been largely caught unaware because we are deviating from the normal practice. But be that as it may, I will make my contribution. Well, first of all, I'm noticing a lot of pedestrian comments. Absolutely pedestrian comments on the depreciating value of the city. I mean, people are saying things which do not add up. And in some instances, people are saying things which simply do not make sense at all. I refer in particular to those in Kasok who claim that the city is falling, the value of the city is falling, simply because we are not praying enough. And that if you're praying enough, we are probably not praying to the right God or praying well and so on. And this is sickening in the extreme. And some of them were heard, not too long ago, praying so hard for the city to rise and commanding the city to rise. And in spite of their commands, the city keeps sinking. And they don't appear to be learning. They are still shouting and disturbing, harming our ears and so on, with silly prayers which resolve no problem and indeed which compound the problem. That's one. You see, I am not one of those who sees His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia as a magician capable of performing wonders with the national economy. I don't see him that way. After all, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is not a new phenomenon. He has not just emerged on the scene and so on. Dr. Bawumia had worked in the Bank of Ghana for some time. He worked as deputy governor under Dr. Kwabena Dufo and so on. Now, if he had any magic, we should have seen that magic much earlier. So I'm not one of those who thinks that he's a magician and has a solution to all the economic problems which confront us. However, I must point out very, very clearly that today, if we prove that Dr. Bawumia, if we manage to prove that Dr. Bawumia is a liar, so what? If we prove that Bawumia is a liar, so what? Does it improve the value of the city? It doesn't. You understand? And so, again, I think we ought to be careful in this analysis. The city did not start depreciating today or yesterday. If you check the record, since 1983, the city has devalued by between 23,000% and 30,000%. Check the record. As of 1983, the city was exchanging at 2.75 cedis to a dollar. 1983, 2.75 cedis to a dollar. Today, if you are looking for 2.75 cedis in 1983, in the current cedi, you can't find it. 2.75 cedis in 1983 is worth less than 1 peswa. Check. 1 peswa today is bigger than 2.75 cedis in 1983. So the cumulative depreciation of the cedi since 1983 is about 30,000%. Now, how do you blame the Mahama administration for this? 1983. How do you, in all honesty, blame Bawumia for this? There's a structural problem with the economy, which was worsened by the push towards neoliberalism in 1983. The adoption of the so-called economic recovery program deepened our own woes in 1983. And we have not corrected that situation. And the city will continue to depreciate no matter what we do. Look, we are now told that we are about to inject, and the figures vary. Sometimes we are told that we will inject $800 million into the economy to stabilize the currency. Other times we are told that we would inject 400 million and so on. This morning, as I was checking through my mail, I saw another statement which says that we are going to inject $4.5 billion into the economy in order to stabilize the city. My brother, that's a waste of everybody's time. We have been trying this over and over and over again, and the city keeps depreciating. Every time we have a crisis with the city, we look for dollars, pump it into the economy, and the situation becomes worse. And we are continuing to do that. I mean, our economic planners are not asking themselves why we have tried this same method over the years and it hasn't solved any problem. The problem keeps increasing, it keeps exacerbating, and so on. And our economic planners are not breaking to reflect. They are not asking themselves the most important questions. Why is it so? You know, the value of the city, the value of the city is determined by a number of factors, including economic policy. First, the formulation of economic policy and its implementation. You can have the best economic policies. If they are not properly implemented, you are in crisis. The value of the city is a function of production. How much are you producing in your economy? It's a function of the level of productivity. What is the level of productivity in your economy? It's a function of international trade. It's a function of so many factors. It's even a function of culture. Culture. What is your culture? What do your people eat? And so on. If your people prefer to eat imported foods rather than locally produced foods, it will affect the currency and so on. So let us be real. Let us think scientifically if we want to deal with the problem of the depreciating value of the city. Something. For us to arrest the depreciation of the city, we need to take steps to remove the pressures on the city. We need to take those steps. What are those steps that we can take? You see, as we sit here, every now and then, when we have problems with managing the economy, all we do is to rush outside the Ghanaian economy and to go and borrow in the billions in order to immediately plug holes and so on. When we do that, do you know what we're doing? The bonds we float and so on is a process of buying money. You understand? So when you hear that we have floated a bond for $10 billion and so on, it means that we are going to buy money. We pay interest on it. By some calculations which I've seen, I mean, in the next couple of, let me look for it. In the next couple of months and so on, we'll be compelled, to pay interest on what we have borrowed, interest on what we have borrowed. And Master, it is not cheap. Listen, and I'm quoting from Professor Gachi. He says, we, however, expect to repatriate over $2 billion to settle foreign loan payments in 2019. So in 2019 alone, we need to find $2 billion to settle, for loan resettlement, loan payments alone. This is from Professor Gachi. You understand? That is a huge pressure on the currency. You understand? This quick rush to borrow, anytime you have a problem, let's go and borrow and so on, it's a major problem. It's pressure on the city. Now, the people who say that they are going to pump $800 million into the economy in order to stabilize the currency and so on, where are they going to find the $800 million from? Where are they going to find the $800 million from? Ghana, of course, we earn dollars, you understand? When we export our cocoa, we earn dollars. When we export timber, we earn dollars and so on. Is that what they are going to take to stabilize the city? The legitimate earnings of Ghana from exports. Is that what they're going to take to stabilize the city? In any case, we do know that our earnings from our exports cannot fully pay for our imports. So if that is what they are going to use to stabilize the city, then you're going to have difficulty importing drugs, importing fuel to power your generation plants and so on. So that's the cost. Now, if they're not going to use that revenue to shore up the city, then they're simply going to borrow more money. And the more they borrow, the more pressure they put on the city. Clearly, this is not a solution to the problem. It cannot be a solution to the problem. At best, it will manage to stabilize the city perhaps around 5 cedis to $1 for a maximum of 4 months. Maximum of 4 months. After 4 months, we will come back to square one. That is not a solution. And indeed, this so-called solution has been tried over and over and over again, and it hasn't helped us in any way. Now, my brother, you know, as we sit here, we still have operative foreign exchange, how do they call it? Foreign exchange retention agreements with all the major mining companies. We have signed agreements with all the major mining companies who simply say that they can keep, in some cases, up to 98% of the value of the minerals they export from this country abroad, in foreign banks abroad. Why would your city not fall? If mining companies can keep 98% of the foreign exchange they earn abroad outside your economy, and mining is supposed to be one of the major foreign exchange earners in our economy, why would the city not fall? So as quickly as possible, we must review these foreign exchange retention agreements with the mining companies if we want to stabilize the city. Because if we don't, whatever money you pump into the system, 8 million, whatever, will still find its way out of the economy. You understand? Because this money will be borrowed by the mining companies for their operations. And they will generate a lot more money by digging your natural resources, exporting it, and keeping the value outside your economy. It doesn't make sense. There is no sense. It's so foolish, it's unbelievable. It's so transparently foolish that everybody should see it, that it doesn't help the economy at all. You understand? Now, one of the things that we did in 1983, when we opted for the Economic Recovery Program, was to minimize government control over the economy and to surrender the economy to private, mostly sometimes informal operators. What we did in 1983 was to surrender our economy to the control of these giant corporations, often called the transnationals or the multinationals. We did not want government to have control over the economy. And I recall some of the statements which were made around that time, that government has no business doing business, and that all government has to do is to facilitate business and not do business and so on. So now we have come full cycle. We've come to the point where government has absolutely no control, or very little control over the economy. Look, under Champong, there was a law which stated very clearly that anybody who was involved in mining, especially gold mining, any company, it needed to have 55% Ghanaian participation. 55, majority shareholding ought to be for Ghanaians. Today, we have come to a situation where Ghanaian interest in mining is less than 3%. And we are complaining that the city is losing value. How would the city not lose value? You understand? Now, the point I'm making is simply this. We are told that they are going to pump, let us assume that the figure is $800 million, into the economy in order to stabilize the city. Anybody with a faint knowledge of currency speculation knows that informal currency speculators, known as black marketeers, do not recognize the borders in West Africa. They don't recognize the borders at all. For them, there's nothing called Ghana, there's nothing called Nigeria, and so on. So what do? They sit in our subcontinent, they are in our subcontinent, watching where the dollar's value is highest and where the dollar's value is lowest. And then they quickly rush in to mop up the currency, trading it in order to establish some equilibrium. So through that practice, these informal operators make nonsense of all these measures. I mean, you pump 800 million into the Ghanaian economy in order to stabilize the city. The black marketeers in Nigeria, in the twinkle of an eye, will be mopping up all those dollars and taking them to Nigeria if it gives them more value. You understand? When the CFA rises in value, they rush for the CFA and trade it across West Africa. When the pound rises in value, these informal speculators rush for it and trade it across West Africa and make nonsense of what the Togolese government, the Ivorian government, the Ghanaian government, or any other government in the sub-region will do. You understand? Now, what measures can we introduce in order to stop or minimize the effect of currency speculation in the West African region? What can we do to minimize the effect of currency speculation in the West African sub-region? And I haven't heard anybody talking about currency speculation as a factor which is pushing down the value of the city. Nobody. And yet currency speculation is one of the most important factors when it comes to the depreciation of the city. And nobody is talking about it. And I just wonder the kind of analysis that we do and so on. Now, listen, one of the major pressures on the currency is just production. I mean, what do we do for ourselves? Show me what we do for ourselves. You'll be surprised that our market women take some measures that, if encouraged, would help us a lot and help to stabilize the city and so on. And I've been interacting with Mr. Abraham Kubson, who is a trade unionist in the textile sector. And I used to do some work also with the late, what is his name? This guy who used to write for Public Agenda, who has just passed away. I'll remember the name much later. Now, what did we do? We went to the textile traders in Makola to try and understand their problem. You know what they do? They design textiles, these women in the market. They design textiles, they name the textiles and so on. And then they go to the textile factories and pay the textile factories to print their own designs with their own labels for them to sell. You understand? They have some of the most beautiful designs in the world and so on. I've seen a lot of the designs done by the women themselves and so on. Now, when the textile factories get these designs and they start production, even before they have finished production for the women, people take the designs and rush them to China. Now, when the designs get to China, they produce inferior quality, the same design and so on, but the material is so inferior and it's so cheap. So by the time that the textile companies are handing over what they have produced for the Ghanaian market woman, designed by the Ghanaian market woman, paid for by the Ghanaian market woman to them, the market would have been flooded with inferior textiles of the same design from China. And the Ghanaian market woman is suffering. Their businesses are collapsing. They're taking loans from the bank, they can't pay, and so on. And this is a reality. You understand? Now, what does that do? That then makes us dependent on imported textiles. And if your economy is dependent on imported textiles, it puts pressure on your currency. The market women have been fighting this situation, as far as I can remember, for about 20 years. I mean, since I started working with those market women, it was about 20 years ago. 20 years ago. Their problem has not been solved. It persists. It's putting pressure on the cedi. The cedi is depreciating. And we are praying to God. We are commanding the cedi to rise. Command the cedi to rise. What kind of a people are we? We must be some very, very intelligent species. Command the cedi to rise. That's our solution. Jesus Christ of Nazareth. That's our solution. And this is where we are. You understand? Now, look at the Ghanaian economy. And I've said this so many times over the last 30 years that it's beginning to sound like some cacophony, but it is true. Go to the restaurant. When you go to the restaurant, after you have eaten, when they bring you the box of toothpick, look at where it's coming from. Look at the label. You are importing toothpick from Malaysia. You are importing toothpick from South Africa. And when your cedi depreciates, you wonder why your cedi is depreciating. It is depreciating because even toothpicks you can't produce. What does it take to produce toothpick? Pen knife. Not even a kitchen knife. If you have pen knives, you know what pen knives are? And you gather together primary school children and give them bamboo. They will produce toothpicks. But you are importing toothpicks. The other time I saw some statistics and it really made me crazy. You know, Ghana is the largest importer of tomato paste from Germany. Ghana. Tomato paste. Ghana is the largest importer of tomato paste from Germany. Burkina Faso is producing tomatoes, semi-desert. Burkina Faso, semi-desert, is producing tomatoes. You go to Kintampo and other areas and observe the trucks bringing in tomatoes from Burkina Faso. And then we are here and we are deceiving ourselves with some useless propaganda. Planting for food and jobs. And the tomato is still flowing in from Burkina Faso. We've been planting for food and jobs for 2 years. And the tomato is still coming from Burkina Faso. And your cedi is depreciating and you are not worried. You know, and you are worried and complaining. You know, the other time, when this so-called planting for food for jobs program started, I was reading the news. I'm sure all of you read the news. There was a meeting somewhere in Tamale and one in Bolgatanga and so on. And the Peasant Farmers Association was complaining that, look, all the inputs which were brought for the agricultural project had been smuggled out of the country. The fertilizer was gone. It went to Burkina Faso. Some went to Togo and so on. Even tractors meant for agricultural development in Ghana was smuggled. And then we are complaining the cedi is depreciating. Why would it not depreciate? When you import the tractor and it doesn't stay in your economy to do what it was intended to do, and it goes to Burkina Faso, it adds more pressure on your currency because you need to find a lot more foreign currency to bring in more tractors. Today, we are importing fertilizers and it's crazy. Fertilizer. I mean, that is the field of Dr. Percy, so maybe I shouldn't go there. I mean, he is the expert, so maybe I shouldn't go there. Everybody knows that the application of chemical fertilizers has a detrimental effect on the health of our population. Everybody knows that. It's established. You understand? Everybody knows that organic fertilizer like compost and so on, which we can produce, there's no reason why Ghana is not able to produce organic fertilizer for agriculture. And why we should be bringing in chemical fertilizers which puts pressure on the cedi. And we have said this and said this and said this and said this for many years. Nobody seems to listen. Agriculture has become another area for propaganda. Instead of doing the work, instead of doing the right things which will enable us to depend on ourselves, which will propel us towards the building of a self-reliant national economy, less dependent national economy and so on, we are all over the place with billboards, and these days the use of billboards is becoming interesting. Everywhere you go, big billboards saying some useless and nonsensical things and so on. Billboards. All our successes can be found on billboards. I haven't been to Tamale for a couple of months, but friends of mine tell me of the spectacle of billboards proclaiming an end to the Dagbon crisis and the restoration of peace and so on. If there is peace in Dagbon, do you have to erect billboards for them to know that there is peace in Dagbon? The people who are in Dagbon, they don't know that there is peace. You have to erect billboards to tell them that there is peace in Dagbon. As is this propagandist approach to government. And the propagandist approach to government is what is killing us. So we are not discussing the substance of things and so on. You know, my brother, I am one person who is deeply worried about what is happening in the banking sector in Ghana. I'm so deeply worried. Because we are creating the conditions for the total domination of the banking sector by foreign capital. We are kicking out indigenous interests in our banking sector through senseless regulations. If you go to Nigeria, indigenous entrepreneurs in the banking sector have different conditions from foreign entrepreneurs in the banking sector. It is only in Ghana where the indigenous entrepreneur and the foreign entrepreneur have the same conditions. Same conditions, no difference. So we are killing our indigenous banking sector with all these measures and so on. Now I'm so deeply worried about that. I believe that we need to have some discrimination in favor of indigenous entrepreneurs. You understand? Ultimately, what should happen is that the people of Ghana should control their own resources. But we are not there yet. So within this framework of neocolonialism, within this framework of implementing some crazy neoliberal policies and so on, at least let us make sure that indigenous capital is protected. That too, Kwatani. That one too, Kwatani, and so on. So I have problems with the policies that have been put together to guide the development of the banking sector in Ghana and so on. But you see, what is happening in the banking sector cannot explain the massive devaluation of the cedi since 1983. You're talking about what period? 1983 to now is what period? So what happened last year and this year does not explain and cannot explain the massive depreciation of the cedi. Indeed, Professor Gachi provides what he thinks is the solution to the problem, and I think I'm inclined to believe him, to go along with him, He says, that borrowing doesn't restore and sustain the strength of a currency. I hope you get me. Export diversification, domestic production, and policies that address the demand side of depreciation must be implemented. That's the only solution. No solution from anywhere. No solution. Let me go over his solution again. This is Professor Gachi, who has been talking to Radio Gold a lot. He says, export diversification, domestic production, and policies that address the demand side of depreciation. That is the way to go. And I hope somebody is listening to this professor. I think they won't listen to people like me and so on, because because they are the letters. We don't have any letters after our name. The letters I have my name only shows that I'm a junior. You understand? If they won't listen to people like me, they should at least listen to people like Professor Gachi and stop beating about the bush. Because the measures they propose to implement will stabilize the city. I have no doubt about it. It will stabilize the city. Around 5 cities, not less than 5 cities. The city will stabilize around 5 cities. But that stabilization will last for a maximum of 4 months. Mark it on the wall.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pratt. And before I move to Dr. David Percy, a couple of messages that have come through our WhatsApp platform. This one from Haji Aruki in New York, USA, says, Senna, what do you expect of the CDs depreciation if the government of Nanado Bawumia are giving more attention on unproductive ventures in the name of vigilantes, pumping more CDs in paying for service that doesn't add anything to the economy? All those monies only go to spending and adding more CDs in the system, chasing a few dollars. You can imagine a leader of a vigilante group called Double paid $9,000 a month. Do you know the total amount that go into the hands of these vigilante groups for doing nothing in the country? Nana Bawumia government is more of a liability to Ghana and will continue to sink this nation to the ditch until 2020 if we are not able to change them. Hadia Ruki sent that from New York in the USA. Comrade Jojo in Taifa says, good morning, comrades. If you have a weak leader like Akufo-Addo and his MPP who have no idea about governance but only interested in rhetorics and lip service, why wouldn't the whole country be in a mess? We must not allow Akufo-Addo and his few to fool us that it's well when life is unbearable. The police service must wise up, else Akufo-Addo is gradually creating an enmity between them and the masses. So between Owusu Bempah and Mugabe, who ought to be invited for interrogation. Political witch hunting is making him more unpopular and will take him into opposition. Emmanuel Chukwuka from Chado in La says 62 years of independent Ghana. Ghana is now crawling from food, clothes, and shelter. Our leaders of today have misled Ghana. Leaders should look at 30 million population of the country and look at the national income of the country and share it among the 30 million Ghanaians. And we'll still have a balance left for health, education, and others. Ghana is beyond aid. Ghana is beyond vigilantism. Ghana is beyond party manifesto. Look.
Thank you very much. Become quite depressing. This our new colony is riding a number of crises that may finally put an end to Nkrumah's Ghana project. And here I'm speaking primarily about the state of impunity that feeds the thuggery. That was evidence, for instance, at Ayawaso West Wogon. And I've been looking from the sidelines and...
The topic is currency depreciation.
Come again?
The topic is currency depreciation.
I spoke about a number of crises that may finally put paid to the Ghana project. One is the currency crisis reflects several of these crises, if I may speak to it. You have at the heart of the government, at the heart of the management of our finances, an assembly of crooks. Having taken charge of government, they've engineered the collapse of several competitor banks, because they were in the banking sector themselves, through various interventions. Now, mind you, in the world of finance and banking, the first commodity is confidence, trust. But bringing down a bank is the easiest thing that you can do, just by sowing doubt. Just that. And people go for their money. Now, every bank in the world will collapse if everybody who's deposited money there goes and says, I want my money. Because when you go and put your money in the bank, it doesn't sit there. It goes out. So the minute everybody goes to the bank and says, look, I have issues of trust, let me have my money, that's the end of that bank. I'm saying that since 2016, a group of criminals have taken charge of the management of our financial system. And they are working methodically to eliminate competition, working with foreign partners by using all the levers of state to collapse one bank after the other. And the latest crazy scheme is to put together this GATT so that their favorites, private banks, in addition to some public sector financial institutions, can be rescued, but merely as a pause in preparation to their final consolidation and takeover. By the time the term of this criminal government is over, they will have taken charge of the banking sector. And that is what is unfolding right before our eyes. The single biggest risk to our country, to our economy. Forget about the issues about its neo-colonial, which we'll discuss in a bit. But the issues about the economy, its current management, is in the person of the Minister of Finance and his cronies, who are working diligently according to the script I've laid out. And it's clear that there are many people, people are busy with other issues. And this is what is happening with our finances. Now, I don't know where I read it. Maybe it was in your invite to me. You spoke about is it assurances of the Minister of Finance? Assurances. Like Kwesi asked, where is the money going to come from? And I think you spoke with Mr. Adongo on your station, who spoke about the play on words by the finance minister, that giving an impression that there was money and a time to be injected, to be made available to people who are looking for dollars, when in fact nothing of the sort is about to happen. It was just merely the play of words that gave that impression. Okay. But then back to the basics. Historically, we've been in this situation for a very long time. Indeed, if you take the period from 1960, you're talking about what, 50-something years ago, to today, our balance of trade has averaged negative 8.21% of GDP per year since 1960 to date. Indeed, in the last 10 years or more, the only time that our balance of trade has been in surplus was in 2017, and before then, 2011. But basically, year on, we import more than we export, and the gap is growing. How have we attempted to address it in the past? And then Nkrumah, we set up a deliberate policy of import substitution. Perhaps that's what Professor Gapchi refers to in euphemism, addressing the demand side of depreciation. Basically, if you take out the brief period at Nkrumah, when we went methodically addressing every area of our demand, so to speak, and developing local capacity, whether it was from safety matches or to radios, to refrigerators, to footwear. We're developing capacity locally to produce for our needs. Okay? In fact, one of the first targets of the traitors who took power in 1966 was to dismantle this program. Factories that were almost complete were abandoned. Those that were completed were stripped. They were run down and they were sold off. Today, practically everything that we need has to be imported. Practically everything. I mean, annually we're importing close to, I think, $2 billion equivalent just for food, a lot of which we can produce here. So nothing short of a comprehensive import substitution program that relies on capacity and potential that we already have. Okay, there are some things that we can't substitute, but for those that we can, there's no reason why we should proceed the way we are proceeding. But you know, there's an aspect of our political economy that we hardly address. How come something so eminently sensible and reasonable is not done by our governments? How come? There's something so simple, straightforward to do. Because we have at the helm of our policies, in terms of those who control our policies, interests that are tied to foreigners and to the regime of imports. So, for instance, I think that Mutala spoke about the example of the Commander Sugar Factory, right? There are powerful interests that import sugar here that will not allow their businesses to collapse, who finance our parties and make sure that the parties stick to the straight and narrow. And you could do that for practically every area of our economy, whether it is for, Chrissy spoke about tomato paste, to sugar, to vegetable oil, whatever it is. There are powerful vested interests in business and in the public services who will insist on us maintaining this regime that only enriches them and their foreign principles and makes us poorer and poorer. So the only way this thing can be confronted is through, first of all, an understanding of this and political mobilization to bring it to an end. The NPP is not for that. Unfortunately, I don't even see that in the NDC. Because, you could point to the Commander Sugar thing, right? But it was a mere token. If you look at the sea of stuff that we import, including sugar, okay, you could say that intervention was merely a token. What is required is a comprehensive program that revisits Nkrumah's program and that brings it up to date. Otherwise, we can bid goodbye to this perennial conversation about the depreciation of the cedi. We can bid goodbye to that. It's really very simple. I think a couple of years ago, I was really struck by a protest by, was it Guta? I think they organized a demonstration or something about the falling, about the, what is it? The depreciation of the cedi. Did they even threaten to go on strike? I said, well, that would be good if they went on strike. Because one was struck by the protestation of a group whose principal business is in the business of importing, which is a principal driver of the collapse of the currency, saying that they are going to go on strike. I said, well, that would be good. But until we get this thing home, that from what we eat to what we wear to what we sleep on, all our facets of our life, if we have to depend on imports, then we have no business complaining about the fact that our currency is going down. Okay. But as to the criminal enterprise involved in the collapse of the banks and the takeover, I'm sure there's a lot more to play out. But for me, it's really simple. You want to get to grips with this. You must recognize the criminality at the heart of it, call it out, and confront it. Done.
Thank you, Dr. Percy. And let me continue with a bit more of a message before we come to the second topic. And this one says, the CD is notorious power. It mesmerized our VIP who was supposed to be Sidilanti. VIP now realized the CD wants to disgrace him. Quickly, he now shifted to new talent, ICT. From Sidilanti VIP to VIP ICT. Charlie, government no be easy. It no be mouth. The job did the field. That's from John Terry from Sakumono. And this one says, from Agbezuke in Sekua Pipe says, is the political pastor in the studio today? I will call Mr. Kwesi Pratt a political pastor because he is a good analyst of the political issues. I pray that God converts him to be Apostle Paul to preach and divide the gospel, as he is mostly unbiased in his analysis of political matters. This one, Nimensa in Nungwa. Okay. Abdul Mumin Ashraf Kapuya says the NDC agenda, he said, okay, you can engage in all the propaganda that you want, but the exchange rate will expose you. What he said in 2016 is reflecting in 2019. You have acquired academic knowledge without any industrial inputs. You can't use textbooks to manage Ghana's economy. Akufo-Addo, you surround yourself with vigilantes as your personal bodyguards and telling us you want to end vigilantism. Are you serious? You are deceiving yourself, not the good people of Ghana. Hypocrites, God has exposed you. We were advised in 2016 to be careful with Nana Addo, yet some 53% of Ghanaians refuse to heed to that advice. Now people can't sleep with their eyes closed under this government. He sent that from Tamale. And this one's from Chris from Ashalboshi says, the MPP lacked the ideas to govern this country. They said Ghana beyond aid, but they have collapsed Ghanaian businesses. They are aiding their campaign sponsors to import more rice, while our poor farmers languish in absolute poverty. They know they have failed Ghanaians woefully, so the MPP are only amassing wealth for themselves so that they can be economically strong in opposition. I don't know how come the government has become so hopeless and stranded and lack common sense to govern this country. So now the MPP is only interested in training militias to intimidate the rest of us, but God will surely dethrone them. I am planning on building a church for Kofi Kumsin to manage because he's more than a prophet. This one says from... Okay, so, hi, Mr. Numbo, tell MPP all what they said in opposition. Today, they quadruple it in office. Instead of the NDC unit capitalizing on them, they are fighting on their platform. It says, and Prince Nkovo-Idua says, our motherland is now suffering. Oh, God. Adi Kujo in Jasikan says, good morning, panel members. All I can say for now is the MPP government led by Nana Akufo-Addo is a complete mess and a failure. And Oscar from Adenta says, good morning, Senator. The incompetent Dr. Bawumia have been exposed by the exchange rate because he is the PhD holder in Alakba. He will hear Boboli Bobo in 2020. Thank you very much for your message, Mefe. This one from Alfred, Agbado Alfred, a.k.a. Abunoko City, from Mefe in the Volta region, says, good morning, Senator, and your panelists in the studio. This time is not doom so, but rather doom preko kra. 24 hours under Nanalaya and Bawolaya government. Oh, God, when are you coming to save Mother Ghana from this wicked and barbaric government? And King Farouk in Tamale says, and I watched that video of Dr. Bawumia with his wife standing by his side, trying to mock the NDC economic management team, saying that we cannot even remember who they are. 2 years down the lane, I don't think the kind of beatings the city depreciation has given Bawumia makes him remember if he is the chairman of the MPP economic management team. Anyway, I hear his incompetence has caused his boss to reshuffle him. And that's from Kim Farouk. And also from Kojo Chumbuafo. Now, he says that, Senator, good morning. My fundamentals are still strong, but my livelihood is weak. Almost overnight, fuel prices have gone up by 6%. My lives have been going on and off like a jack in the box. My savings have been devalued in comparative terms by almost 23% overnight. I am suffering. My pockets are suffering. My family is suffering. My pets are suffering. My wives are suffering. My side chicks are suffering. My slave queens are suffering. I am buying $1 for 5 cedis 83 pesos today. It's a sign of bad leadership. Vote for change. And King Farouk again says, listening to Mr. Kwesi Pratt's solid submissions on the CD or dollar wrestling match, I can place my bet on him that a debate between him and Dr. PhD in economics, Baumia, will be a mismatch. He seems to have a better understanding of the situation we are faced with than the reshuffled chairman of the NPP's economic management team. Baumia is a failure. No wonder he's now competing with IT experts to remain relevant. And he sent that from Kasua. And this one from Nikwe Idi Tabura Atram says, please, I want to send this information across. Our brothers who change money at the airport are now being targeted by armed robbers for attack. Kindly inform the general public. Yesterday, my neighbor was robbed of a bag full of dollars by armed robbers at gunpoint in front of police personnel who were directing traffic around Airport Junction. It said that is an information that people should take note of. And Babamusa only quotes what Dr. Baumia says. And the quote is, if single-digit inflation is meaningless for cost of living, interest rates, exchange rates, and jobs, what is it for? To put it another way, if single-digit inflation does not help with respect to the prices of the things you buy, the cost of borrowing money for your business, the value of the cedi to the dollar, or help the youth to get jobs, then what is the point? I would however leave the judgment on whether we actually have single-digit inflation to Ghanaians who shop in our markets every day. And that's a quote from him, delivered a lecture at Ferdinand O. Eyim Memorial Lecture on May 2nd, 2012 in Accra from Dr. Mahmoud Baumia. Magdo says, when you tell lies to win political power and the reality catches up with you, your lies will expose you. Whatever you sow is what you would reap. Why is it that the voodoo economics theories preached when he is in opposition is not working now? God save Ghana from these looters. Magdo sent that from Alajo. Just to remind you that among our sponsors is Franco Trading Enterprise, and they are offering you a 30% discount when you buy products from them online. And also, if you live within Accra, they will deliver it to you for free. They sell, among others, mobile phones, accessories, laptops, printers, and TV. So you can make any of those purchases using their online platforms. You can get them on www.francotrading.com or www.francophones.com. Alternatively, you can download their app through Google Play Store, Franco Trading app. Make a purchase today, get a 30% discount on any of the purchases you make. You are within Accra, they deliver it free of charge. You can call them on 0302 225 651, 0302 225 651, or 0546 133 188. And Mobile Water is also offering you their door-to-door delivery service. All you have to do is get in touch with them. They'll provide 20-liter water bottles to you that you can use. When they are finished, they will come and refill them. Just give them a call today, 0244 650 939, 0244 650 939 for instant supply. You can visit them at the Headlight Industrial Area behind Mark Baron Hotel, Apollo Road. And Kulun Ghana Limited are also one of our sponsors, and they are offering you King Tablet for hypertension. If you have problems with your blood pressure, try King Tablet. That is one of the products they are also offering. If you're a woman, they are offering Araba Bazen pills and just for menstrual disorders, among other issues, and X and Y granules for men with fertility issues. You can call them on 0244 139 176, 0244 139 176, or 0204 139 176. You can also use their Airtel Tigo number 0274139176. They are the sponsors of our program, including TT Brothers. You can buy the Anchor Tea Malt, also the Anchor Tea Energy drink. Well, let's move on to our second topic, and it has to do with the return of Dumso or not. The government says no. The minority says they have reason to believe that we may be back to the dark days. Comrade.
First and foremost, I think that as to whether we are experiencing Dumso or not can only be judged by the Ghanaian people. As I was outside before this program, I was being given information as to the specific areas that people experience Dumso. Dumso, my understanding is that is an Akan word, isn't it? On and off. So government can pretend that there's no Dumso. The meaning, the content is still the same. We are experiencing Dumso because people still experience it. And the information that I was given was that on the 22nd of November 2018, we experienced Dumso in some specific areas. Top Herbal, Hacho, Atomic, Medina, Roman Ridge, Kanda, Pantine, Abukobi, all these places they experienced Dumso. On the 23rd of November, Pokwasi, ACP, Ofonko, and many other areas. And I believe that there are several areas. These are just in Accra alone. The list is endless. I had information from Tamale and other places across the country where people experience Dumso. Now, the difficulty and the challenge we have experienced under this government on the issue of Dumso is that we are experiencing it at times that conditions are unbearable. They're unbearable because you know that we are in the heat season. And when I say heat season, people, these are seasons that you find many people who can only make do with the outside natural air. So you go to certain communities, you find people, lying outside because the rooms are just unbearable. I remember that when there's so much heat during the day, in the night, the heat are absorbed in the room, so you can't even stay, even if you have fan, except those who have the luxury of having air conditions. Now, the challenge we have now is that people are scared to sleep outside and to be able to maintain their lives, body and soul outside in this, challenging heat or conditions that we have. And the reason is simple, because we also live in the most precarious times, that security can never be guaranteed under this government, that the police CID themselves in their 2018 report, first quarter indicated that first quarter of 2018 registered the highest armed robbery ever in the history of this country. We live in times where 3 young girls have been abducted. Nobody knows the whereabouts of those young girls. The police is not giving us any information. The police is not giving any hope to the family. The government simply doesn't care. In other jurisdictions, this could have occasioned address of the state by the government, because we have never had that. We may have instances where you have a kidnapping or one way or the other, but to have 3 young girls being kidnapped, I'm not too sure whether it is not more than 3 months now, and we don't know the whereabouts. We also live in times where you can be driving and you are shot in your car. I still remember Ahmed Swale. Strangely, in this country, the topic of such murder has now been quenched. The topic of crime in this country, because there are some section of the media, once President Nana Addo Zix de Zag, and I made a reference to even the analysis expose of Kwesi Nyantakyi. The impression is created now as if the expose had to do with the rot within the GFA. Everybody in this country knew there was rot within the GFA. The most important aspects of the expose was the complicity of the president and the vice president and his appointees in bribe taking. Now that issue has been thrown somewhere. Nobody is talking about it, because a masterclass using section of the media to kill the story and nobody talks about it. So clearly, we have had Dumso in this country before, and I'm not saying entirely it is the absolute responsibility of the MPP and Nana Ado's administration to talk about or to experience Dumso. We have had that. And I have said that it seems to me that every 10 years we experience Dumso. Because if you look at what has happened, at least in the last 20 or 30 years, that we have had these things with us. The extent to which we find an amicable and permanent solution to it, for me, demonstrate leadership. But you see, Senna, in 2013, 2014, and 2015, we had some challenges as far as generation or generational capacity or ability of energy in this country is concerned. And to a very large extent, the Akusumbo Dam, which is hydro, we cannot talk about it, but to give indeed commendation to Osajefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, even at the time when he was doing it, the current people who are ruling this country opposed it. Now, Akusumbo had a capacity of 1,120 megawatts. But within 2013-2014, they were producing 360 megawatts. Pong had a capacity of 180. 2014, 2015, 2013, they were producing at 60 megawatts. You have Bui, which had a capacity of 400 megawatts. 2013, 2014, 2015, they were producing at 200. So what it means is that our dependence on hydro as a source of energy was going to be challenged, because the reason had to do with natural challenges, because the rains and the water levels at these places were very low, and for which reason they could not produce to capacity to be able to take care of the needs of the Ghanaian people. Now, we also had sources of energy from thermal, and if you observed, hydro indeed produced about 60% of our energy needs, and thermal about 40% of our energy needs. So if you have the indeed thermal, assuming that even the thermal was able to produce the 40%, the hydro, which was challenged because of the environmental conditions and lack of rains and the level of the water seeding, you certainly could not get the 60% that would augment the 40% produced by thermal. So that was the reason why we experienced the Dumso. Now, I am saying that we have had Dumso experience in many governments. But I am saying, when we experienced this, what did the NDC government do to be able to ensure that at least we are able to produce enough so that our dependence on energy supply, does not hinge on just hydro? So President Mahama indeed felt that for us to depend on hydro for 60% of our energy need and 40% of thermal for our energy need, why not produce enough thermal generation such that we wouldn't be dependent so much on hydro, because the thermal wouldn't be dependent or hinged on rains, such that when the water level goes low down, you would have the challenge. So President Mahama brought in Ameri, brought in Car Power, and brought in AXA. Now, the MPP made a whole lot of noise about it. They said that it was fraudulently procured, and that in fact, it was a political, football field for them. Unfortunately and sadly, when they came, they did nothing about it. But I'll come to the politics they did with it. Now, the NDC didn't just stop at producing or bringing in Ameri, AXA, and Car Power. We also entered into an arrangement with Amandi Power, which was indeed to start in June 2019. So what it means is that the contract that the NDC government entered into on Amandi, that thing will start in June this year. So this was visionary. Now again, we're also dependent on gas from Nigeria. And because we're dependent so much on gas from Nigeria, anytime Nigeria indeed has difficulty in terms of their gas supply to us, it means that we're going to have a lot of challenge. Remember that Nigeria itself has a challenge with regards to the supply of energy for their citizens. So in order for us to indeed get our independence from this huge dependence on gas from Nigeria for our plants, we went in for the Atuabo under the Ghana gas. And the Atuabo was supposed to produce about 150 million, cubic standard, 150 million standard cubic feet of gas each day. So the 150 million was going to indeed provide some of the challenges. So for which reason we may have some independence and not dependent so much on Nigeria. So in 2015, the NDC went into ENI, arrangement, that is gas arrangement, to produce enough gas so that we don't depend on Nigeria again. I mean, clearly, this is what we call visionary, because for several decades, we depended on hydro. Now, if thermal was 40, and President Muhammad took the steps to bring in Ameri, AXA and others, so that we'll be able to produce enough thermal, so the hydro will still be producing. So anytime we have the water level going high, that will only be a plus. It means that the amount of money we'll be spending on gas to be able to propel the machines to generate enough, energy through thermal is something that was going to be reduced. So if you have more, it doesn't take away anything. And remember that we're also in the capacity to indeed export energy to Ivory Coast and other neighboring countries. So we're going to make a lot of money out of that. Now the ENI agreement which the NDC did, that was the purpose for it. But see, he didn't also stop there. President Muhammad also realized that there was a liquidity challenge. And the liquidity challenge was confronting the ECG, VRA, Gridco, and Netco. So there were a lot indebtedness with regards to this indeed power supply, companies. So what President Muhammad did was what was described as the energy sector levy, which is also known as the ESLA. Now the purpose of it was to generate enough money so that we'll be able to pay the debts that these companies owe. Because even if you produce enough thermal and you produce enough gas, and you don't depend on Nigeria, then indebtedness is something that will continue. So what visionary leaders do is that you look for the necessary revenue to be able to do what? To take care of those indebtedness. And so when ESLA, and as a result of that, the debts of these companies were actually paid. And I'll give you, in 2016, ECG, for example, did not only clear that, they made a profit of 725 million Ghana cedis in 2016. Gridco made a profit of 69 million Ghana cedis. And Netco made a profit, Netco, they made losses. And the losses were minimal, 1.39 million Ghana cedis. As a result of those measures, the losses that Netco would have made would have been more. But at least you had the losses that Netco made, which reduced up to 1.39, and both Gridco and ECG made profits. And these are in hundreds of millions of Ghana cedis. Now, let's look at all these gains that I've explained that NDC bequeathed to NPP. When NPP came into office, ESLA, they used ESLA to raise a bond of 4.7 billion. So one expects that when you use ESLA to raise such bond, then ESLA, the companies, ECG, Gridco, and Netco, should not have any problems. By the way, they were all making profit. The only out of the three that didn't make profit, that made losses, was Netco, and the losses was just 1.39. Now you use it to raise a bond of 4.7 billion. Ironically, in 2017, ECG made a loss of 521 million. Gridco made a loss of 31 million. If ECG could make 725 million in 2016, and even with ESLA coming on stream, yet under this incompetent government, they made a loss of 521 million from a profit of 725 million. Gridco made a loss of 31 million from a profit of 69 million, and Netco, which I said initially that they were the only company that made loss of 1.39 million. In fact, Netco made a loss of 10 million Ghana cedis. Now, in 2018, ECG made a loss of 2 billion Ghana cedis. So what it means is that from 2017, from the gains that the NDC made as a result of these concrete measures taken by President Mahama, NPP, which was indeed bequeathed to NPP, they started going down the drain. The initial loss of ECG of 725 million in 521 million in 2017. By 2018, in fact, specifically, they made a loss of 2 billion Ghana cedis. Gridco, which I indicated that they made profit of 69 million in 2016, but made a loss of 31 million. In 2018, they made a loss of 212 million Ghana cedis. Netco, which continuously, with the loss of 1.9 under the NDC, 1.39 under the NDC, and made a loss of 10 million in 2017. In 2018, they made a loss of 203 million Ghana cedis. Now, look at the debt of VRA, and for me, that is also very significant. And I'm making this point to buttress a point that the issue of doomsday we experience today has got nothing to do with generational capacity. It has to do with management. In 2018, VRA owed Ghana Gas $735 million. $735 million. And the ENI gas that indeed started producing in October 2018, VRA has been consuming this gas. So if you owe the Ghana Gas about 735 million, yet you are even consuming the ENI, and the purpose for the ENI was to be able for us to produce enough gas so we don't depend on Nigeria alone on gas. Where anytime Nigeria feels that they do not need to supply us with gas, then would have challenge with our electricity or energy supply. In fact, the VRA owe Ghana, the ENI, $160 million. $160 million. Now the ENI have been doing this. So what they do is that they would have to rely on the escrow account of the guarantee, and that money was not supposed to be used for that. But if you do not pay and we need to generate, we have to rely on the escrow account for the amount of money to do this. So what I'm simply saying is that it is very clear what we are doing. In fact, the last time we checked in the escrow account, money that was meant that you could only use it under some serious circumstances. Ideally, you don't need to even use monies from the escrow account. Now, the monies that are left in the escrow account as at October last year was $16 million. 16 million. Now, it means that even if they would have to go in for their own. So what government has done? Government has taxed GMPC to borrow money. To borrow money to be able to take this, and they are supposed to borrow $250 million to be able to do this. So if anybody comes out to tell me that the doomsday we experience is not as a result of management, what else? Now the reason why VRA is indebted, and the reason why the ECG, Gridco, and Netco, who indeed were making profits as a result of President Mahama and the NDC taking concrete steps to ensure that we have enough gas, and also the ESLA, and for which reason this thing is abused. The reason why they are in such indebtedness is because of management. Finito. There can't be any explanation to the challenge that we have. So doomsday is back. You see, the sad aspects of it is that this government must admit that we have doomsday, so that they can have a schedule, so that I know if I have a small company and I know that I'm not going to have lice today, I won't have lice from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. So if I need to do certain things, I'll do that. Domestic usage, then I know that yes, I won't put my food in the fridge and go to work, because by the time I come from work, the food would have been rotten. This government is unwilling. And you see, there is a proverb in Dagbani, with all due respect to our listening public, that you can't sleep with itching anus and expect not to wake up with smelling fingers. And that is why this government is going through what they are going through.
Thank you. Richard.
Okay. Thank you. I think yesterday or 2 days ago, Gridco issued a press statement.
What's yesterday?
To say that because of the Pokuase construction, which is ongoing, they are instructing ECG or PDS. People have started calling them proper doomsday, to begin load shedding exercise for a number of days, ending on the 19th of March. Well, I would just say that 19th of March is just around the corner. And so after 19th of March, we shall be able to ascertain whether the doomsday we are experiencing is going to be temporary or it is much serious than what they are talking about. Because 19th is just around the corner. Just Tuesday, yes. You see, no economy can thrive without power. The reason why China has risen so much over the past few years is because they are able to provide power which is much more cheaper than what the USA is able to provide. Therefore, industries are much more comfortable to move to China and produce and get cheaper products out there. Okay. When Mr. Kwesi Pratt was making his submission earlier on, he mentioned that we have been importing tomatoes. In fact, we are the highest importer of tomato from Germany. The thought that came to mind was that, I mean, I wasn't surprised to hear that, even though it was my first time to note that from him. But you see, Germany is in Europe. They live in a place where snow falls almost half of the year. Okay? Yet, Germany has more renewable energy generation than Ghana. So, electricity is much, much cheaper in Germany than Ghana. So, why would tomato making factories not excel there than in Ghana? Because you set up a factory, one of the most important things you need is cheap access to constant electricity. In fact, we are speaking in a radio studio right now, and if I'm not lying, you people may be paying in the tens of thousands of ECG bills every month for just transmitting, radio waves. Okay, the point I'm trying to make is that the kind of energy plan we have as a nation is not sustainable, especially looking at where we are located. Whenever you talk about renewable energy sources like solar and the rest, people will tell you that, oh, solar and wind is not sustainable, blah, 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 the people in the energy sector. Okay? But I asked myself, last year, 2018, January 2018, Germany got so much renewable energy that the government was encouraging people to use more energy so that the energy which has been stored in the system will be expelled. Germany, which is located in Europe, where they have snow, they had so much solar energy last year, January, that they were encouraging their citizens to use the energy to expel it so that it goes away. We are here, the sun has shined so much that you and I are black. Yet our experts are telling us that renewable energy sources are not sustainable. Simply because when we buy power plant, somebody will be buying fuel every month, and that somebody who is buying the fuel will be getting some money into his pocket. And so even the experts who are supposed to advise the politicians are advising wrongly. Okay, so just like Honorable Murtala Mohammed is saying, yes, when there is financial problems, doomsday will come, because the kind of energy models we are running requires that every now and then we need to go and buy either crude oil or gas in order to be able to power our generational, equipment that we have in this country. So when you have financial challenges, you are going to have doomsday. Part of the reasons why we had doomsday, some time ago, was the fact that at a point in time, some of the bulk distributors were not able to access credit facilities to be able to generate the energy. And part of it was that ECG itself didn't have efficient means of, raking in the revenue that they are supposed to rake in. So, going forward, whether what we are experiencing now is doomsday as expressed by the minority, or whether it is not doomsday as expressed by the government and GRIDCO, going forward, in order for us to put this argument behind us and to be able to get over this argument of whether we have doomsday or not, I think that the government of Ghana, and I'm not restricting it to only the ruling government, all of us should come together and take a second look at our energy policy in this country, because I don't understand why we live in the tropics where sun is so much in abundance. Look at our streets. Street lights are connected to the grid. The government has an ambition of doing what we call one district, one factory. How is one district, one factory going to survive with this kind of energy situation? In this country, even the people who produce takeaway packs and plastic bottles and the rest, go and look at the amount of money they pay for electricity. Assuming Safo Kantanka decided to melt his metals in Ghana and mold his car engines in Ghana, imagine the amount of energy he will need and the electricity needs he will need before he can do that. From where I work, we wanted to set up a tin manufacturing equipment in Elmina. It didn't work. Okay, because the equipments are such that you need to put the machines on for about 8 hours uninterrupted before it will be able to melt the metals and compose them into the tin that they use to do this milk tin and tin tomato and all of those things. You put the machine on and within 8 hours it goes off. You have to start over all over again. So the equipments are there. They didn't work. So when we are talking about unemployment in this country and we have this energy regime which is already expensive and also unreliable. You see, today people are complaining because their lights have been going off for, let's say, 8 hours and then it comes back. But it is also true that even when the lights are not going off for 8 hours and coming back, in a day, sometimes your lights can go off twice in this country. It will go off 30 minutes, come back, go off again and come back. And this is not good for industry. Not good for any developing country that is interested in using industrialization to transform its economy. So, to wind up, I want to say that Dumso is not an ECG issue. Dumso is not a GRIDCO issue. Dumso is a government energy policy issue. If we are interested in resolving Dumso, we need to boldly tackle the bull by the horn. Say no to those fake experts in the energy industry who are only interested in enriching their pockets, therefore always promoting government purchasing power, what do you call it? Car power, whatever power plants and all of those things, just so every now and then we'll go and buy crude oil and those technocrats working in the energy industry become rich at the expense of the state. We need to move away from that kind of energy source and look at how we can sustainably tap into energy from the solar, from the wind, and even from water, even though we are destroying our water bodies. I still believe that if we put in place a good mechanism, we can still get enough energy from these renewable sources so that we can only have these power plants for emergency purposes. Because of course we know that there are times of the year that the sun doesn't shine so much. Okay, so you can plan in such a way that during the time the sun is shining, we are relying heavily on solar. If the rain is falling, we switch to the power plants for a moment and then we come back. We can plan in such a way that at the times that the wind is blowing so much. I live in Adenta. I know a private person in whose house he's using wind power to generate electricity. You pass around third gate at Achalebutri and you always see the thing turning around and the man is using it. So if a private person is doing it, why can't government of Ghana invest in it so that we can have a sustainable power regime in this country?
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. Wilson.
Yeah. So now very brief and quick, since we don't have much time and my senior comrades who also want to have a bite on this. I am not interested in the terms and the names given to it. And that has been my position for the past years. Whether you want to call it Dumso or Dum or So or what have you. My interest is that I do pay for a service, and I'm expecting that if I have done the payment and I have been able to take part of my side of the bargain, then the other side or the other party must also be able to deliver to whatever I have paid for. It is a fact that this past weeks we've not been getting what we need to get as far as the supply of energy is concerned or electricity is concerned. It is also a fact that some few days back I witnessed a number of shops or businesses that were all in one building closing just around 2 or 3 p.m. simply because since morning they've not been able to get electricity to work, and they felt that it was just a waste of time being in the office. It is also a fact that individuals in these past weeks or days, having gone out to work and coming home thinking that they will be able to have electricity to do whatever they need to do at home, they get home only to realize that they do not have access to electricity. And no one had that courtesy to even communicate beforehand that there's going to be some difficulties with supply of energy or supply of electricity in particular areas. And so the customers are supposed to prepare before then. And so the truth of the matter and the reality is that we are not getting the electricity supply as we ought to get. And unfortunately, we are paying for it. You go to most homes and we are using what we call the prepaid. In other words, we even pay before the service is rendered. And I believe that it is just a handful of organizations that will have this kind of privilege arrangement, where before you even supply me or you give me your services, I have already done the payment. And it tells you that we do not have any excuse. My worry is coming from communicators of the ruling party or the government, where instead of us being told structures and mechanisms that are being put in place to ensure that this disruption does not continue, people are rather quick to come and remind us and to tell us that, oh, this is just for a week, or you've experienced this for just some days. It is better than some years back where you were experiencing it for months and years. And I think that this is an insult to all of us. When people that we are paying to fix challenges that confront us rather comes out and in defending their inability to execute what they are being paid to do, they come to tell us that comparing us to worse situations, we should rather be encouraged. The basic problem in line with our inability to enjoy the electricity supply as we are supposed to enjoy is purely managerial. And indeed, it has nothing so much to do with production. It is simply because we are having individuals who are not thinking outside the box. It is simply because we are having individuals to lead and manage us who have failed to go beyond what the traditional way of managing things have presented us. And so this is how we came to inherit it. This is how the management has been taking place over the past years. And so let us continue on that tangent. Isn't it so disheartening that over this so many years of we becoming a republic and independent country, we've not been able to think and say that, look, as population increases, there's going to be extra burden on some of our traditional sources of energy and power. And so let us see how we can also divert and then bring in other sources. Neil made mention of wind energy, solar, and coal. Why is it that we are not able to explore and say that, look, we are bringing in all this for us to give alternatives to the citizens, instead of just relying on one or two sources, where these sources relies heavily on our ability to raise a certain amount of money, said that if we fail to raise those monies, all of us are found wanting, forgetting that we are in a dispensation where almost everything moves on energy and electricity. And I have just mentioned to you earlier on the few offices and shops that I know that these past days they decided to work half day simply because they were not having access to electricity. We can imagine the number of offices and shops that went through the same situation. And if a nation such as Ghana want to be seen as a serious nation, let us find a way of computing and calculating the amount of money that the economy lost on that particular day as a result of these various companies and offices shutting down. I am saying that, look, as a nation, whether we want to call it doomsday or what have you, that is not important to me. The most important thing is that we are paying for a particular service. It is our basic right, running on the law of contracts, to just also receive the services that we are paying for. And it is also time for us as a nation to elect leaders that will surely be thinking outside the box. Leaders that will not just be looking at today and tomorrow, but will be planning and be putting structures in place for the future. So that, these occurrences and reoccurrences of energy shortages and electricity not being supplied adequately and the rest, we must get to the stage where we say that this is a thing of the past. This is a thing of the past because the more we engage in this, it even affects our ability to plan successfully. Today, we can plan and say that tomorrow we are going to do A, B, C, D. Tomorrow comes and the A, B, C, D we decided to do is based on our ability to access electricity. Tomorrow comes only to realize that we don't have access to electricity. Okay. It affects everything.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Percy.
Thank you very much. We're asking ourselves, is it the return of doomsday or is it financial challenges? I'm not sure which is which. However, it's difficult to really start this thing. I'm trying to gather my thoughts. But basically, the problem in the power sector, like many of the problems that we speak about regularly, has its roots in the same set of problems or set of issues, whereby our country, our economy, our policy, our politics is held hostage to private and, for the most part, foreign interests. And what is happening in the power sector with this doomsday thing is merely a reflection of this central fact. Now, our government, if we go back to say the 2000, the period 2000, coincide with the tenure of our President Kufuor. Then we knew that we had to invest each year in developing additional generational capacity, something to the tune of 200 megawatts per year. For the best part of that period, 2001 to 2008, we literally invested all our energy eggs in the gas pipeline. According to some, because we're expecting some hefty personal gains for a few people. So we failed to invest. The accumulation of that failure to invest was what was inherited and became known as doomsday. In dealing with doomsday, perhaps under the certificate of emergency or urgency, we took several decisions, some not so good for us. Again, oftentimes hostage to not the common interest of Ghanaians or the Ghanaian economy, but private interests. In the middle of all of this, again, beginning under the MPP, responding to pressure from the Americans, who, in a bid to maintain their global dominance, are looking to secure for themselves commanding heights in the food sector through the control of our seeds, etc., and also energy, because we know that if somebody controls your food and he controls your energy, he has you by the short and careless. He has control of your life. So Americans have seen an area of investment, of opportunity, they'll call it, in the power sector. So you know what? Literally in exchange for what the government and its agencies have come to owe ECG, in exchange for what the government of Ghana over a period, through its ministries, departments, and agencies, had come to owe ECG, agreed that will hand over the corporation to a private concessionaire. We'll basically privatize ECG. And we've done that to the chorus of Hallelujah. Mm-hmm. Now, I can guarantee you a number of things over the next several years. A constant rise in tariffs. Okay? If you are not able to get that, a deterioration in the supply. Because what has been the feature of the power sector over the last several years? The demand outstripping supply. Aging transmission equipment and infrastructure, which cannot be addressed because they are not collecting enough from the generation of the service and the provision of the service. This has been a kind of circular spiral. This is the situation we're in. Demand outstripping supply, poor infrastructure, which cannot be maintained because we are not collecting enough money. And in the middle of all of this, we've handed it to private interests whose sole focus and concern has to be the bottom line. So what we are guaranteed in the next several years, if they don't collect enough money, if they cannot keep the tariffs up and up and up, will be a deterioration in service. Now, what might happen, and has happened in other areas, in other countries, who have followed this script, is that in poor neighborhoods, when people have come to depend on electricity, they would, an industry would develop. I think there's already an industry in illegal tapping, in illegal connection to the grid, in devising ways and means by which people get around the metering system so that they get the service, they don't pay for it. Another scenario I'm describing. The next step is that the power company goes in there with armed force, police protection, to try and disconnect. In some neighborhoods, they are subject to attacks, kidnapping, even murder. So I get to a point where it becomes dangerous for the electricity company, now privatized, to get its money. What does it do? It shuts down the neighborhood. It disconnects the entire neighborhood. So then you find places like East Legon, Airport Residential, Laboni, well lighted. The citizens can afford. You may have places like Nima, Mamobi. I don't want to add to the list, maybe Shukura, which are in complete darkness. And I'm saying that this has happened in some other countries. And we are singing hallelujah, following down that same crazy path to hell. And I don't hear anybody complaining about it. I'm saying that this criminality was started under MPP. It was continued under NDC.
Okay. Look, Mr. Pratt.
That is what lies in store for us.
Thank you, Doc. Mr. Pratt.
Well, there isn't much to say, you know. I mean, look, whether we call what is happening doomsday, whatever, the point is that it would adversely affect economic development in our country. It would impose considerable hardship on our people. It will worsen the current state of the city and so on. And something needs to be done about it. It's an urgent task, you know. My understanding is that the level of indebtedness in the electricity power sector is huge. We owe the independent power producers billions of cedis. We owe Gridco billions. We owe practically everybody. The Volta River Authority, for example,